Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 879 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we're hearing that there are bombers simply miles from St. Petersburg, and that's very massive news. And also, it is the Sunday night fundraiser, and it's a big night indeed. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as we have gotten major news that U.S. B-52H Stratofortress bombers, for the first time in history, have flown just miles from St. Petersburg, as the airspace has been opened by Finland for the United States Air Force to be able to use and operate in. This is a major strategic development in the region, and is certainly starting to put the Russians at a very disadvantageous position in the light of a possible conventional conflict beginning in the future. Of course, a hypothetical one, and I have to say that very strongly. But that is incredibly huge news, and it is a first of its kind in the history of the world. Not only that, we were able to get major news out of Moscow as well, that apparently most of the IL-76s stationed around Moscow in the Russian Air Force are completely unusable, because they are starting to run into some major issues and flaws that are being brought about because of bad aviation parts being sourced from other countries rather than Western nations. And so it seems as though the Russian military aviation is starting to show very clear and public signs of disrepair. Not only that, but major news has come out of the Middle East as well, as the Houthis have returned fire on Israel after Israel struck and destroyed a massive oil depot within the port of Al Hodeida within Houthi control. We were able to see that the missiles were launched from Houthi-controlled Yemen and into the area of southern Israel, where they were then intercepted by the Arrow 2 anti-ballistic missile system. Once again showing that the region, well, the tensions within the region are fairly high. At the exact same time, we were also able to see that Hezbollah is continuing attacks against Israel as well, and the Iron Dome is attempting to intercept these incoming rockets and missiles, and it appears that as of today, they've had a very high success rate. Meanwhile, inside of Ukraine itself, there have been major news of conflicts and battles happening around the area of Vovchansk, Avdiivka, and Bakhmut, as the Ukrainians continue to inflict incredibly high casualties, wildly high casualties, onto the Russian Federation's armed forces, and it appears that the morale has gotten so low that we have gotten more Russians taking to the internet today and talking about the sheer momentous or behemoth losses that they are taking in all fronts today, more so than we've ever gotten over previous weeks, or really the last month and a half or two of the entire war. We have absolutely major news from start to finish tonight here on this stream, but before I get into the first major bit in Finland, I want to make sure to remind everyone that it is the Sunday night fundraiser, and tonight's fundraiser is for none other than Nova Ukraine, an amazing fundraiser, well, an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out in Ukraine for years now and does loads of things, from the humanitarian to the well, really humanitarian in general. Of course, YouTube doesn't allow anything rather than a humanitarian fundraiser. But as far as their humanitarian work goes, they provide medical aid, they provide food, they provide shelter, and they also continue to try and support awareness projects here in the Western world to keep people's minds focused on Ukraine and remind them of the major conflict that is currently brewing in the eastern area of Europe at this moment. But moving on from that little shout out to Nova Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit, we're now going to be moving on up into Finland, because this is where the big news came out today. Massive news. And I'm going to show you all the picture, and then we're going to get into the details of it. This is a B-52H Stratofortress right here that you're seeing in this picture, operated by the United States Air Force. And right below it is a Finnish FA-18 Hornet. That is the first time in this picture that you're seeing right here that a B-52H Stratofortress has flown this close to the city of St. Petersburg, the second largest city within the Russian Federation and one of Russia's most important ports in the modern day. This is a
this seems like fair payback. Considering the Russians just took their ships right off the coast of Florida, this is fair payback to literally fly our bomber right past the Russian border as well. And it's good to see that we're actually giving basically an eye for an eye here in the situation.
I would have to agree. I also have to say that it just looks incredibly cool to have one of our strategic bombers flying this close to the Russian Federation. Of course, many people kind of misinterpret the concept of the modern day bomber like the B-52. A lot of people say that the B-52s are obsolete, but I believe, if many of y'all have seen in the war in Ukraine, strategic bombers like these are actually not out of the running at all. In fact, they are as potent and as dangerous today as they were in the past when this kind of an idea of carpet bombing, which this aircraft was pretty much designed for initially, was the mainstay of air operations against an enemy force. Nowadays, these B-52s carry cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that they drop from high altitude, and then they make their way to their target somewhere inside of enemy territory. These B-52s are showing a dangerous sign to the Russians. These things can carry some pretty devastating weaponry, and the fact that this B-52H flew so close today to St. Petersburg, it lets us know that the United States is starting to send a message that there's been a bit of a checkmate. And the checkmate is that if the Russians did anything, U.S. strategic bombers are practically within minutes of launching off cruise missiles and ballistic missiles from these B-52s that will be able to start targeting and destroying a large amount of critical Russian infrastructure and critical military installations around the area of St. Petersburg, opening up an attack path for U.S. forces to move further in, or for further air operations to commence around the second largest city inside the Russian Federation. To get y'all a little bit of extra information about this that we got from OSINT Defender said, for the first time in history, which is true, a pair of the U.S. Air Force B-52H strategic bombers are currently flying over Finland while being escorted by Finnish FA-18s as a show of force against the Russian Federation. Earlier today, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have intercepted a pair of B-52s over the Barents Sea as they approached Russian airspace, with them being escorted by Russian MiG-29s and MiG-31s before turning back towards Finnish airspace. To give you all an idea of where the Barents Sea is right up here. It's just north of the major Russian naval port of Murmansk, and also a little bit north of Arkhangelsk, which is just down here, right here, which is also another port that's used by the Russian Navy here in the north. This is a really big development. Of course, the two B-52s up in the Barents Sea, to be entirely honest with y'all, that's fairly normal. That's nothing too big or nothing game-changing, really, as far as the standoff in between the West and Russia. But the fact that these aircraft, these B-52s, two of them for that matter, were flying over Finland today, and we believe that they were only a couple of dozen miles away, or not really that far at all, maybe over 10 miles away from the Finnish border. This is an incredibly big ordeal. If we were to say that they were just 10 miles away from the Finnish border at best, that's about 10. That's roughly enough. That means that these bombers were flying 97 miles away from St. Petersburg. That means that these B-52s were lit up on every single Russian radar across the border inside the Russian Federation, and the Russians knew that those B-52s were there. And we want them to know that they are there. And just giving them a very clear message that those B-52s now have a brand new attack corridor that they can make into Russia, or really to set up to fly into in Russia and launch off cruise missiles at key sites around St. Petersburg. And I once again have to remind everyone that St. Petersburg has been a little bit under the NATO gun really since the Baltic states have joined NATO, especially Estonia back in the early 2000s. When Estonia joined NATO, that means that a NATO attack corridor could pretty much barrel its way down the E20 motorway straight to St. Petersburg, which is only a 50-mile distance from the Estonian border. Now with Finland joining, not only do we have the major attack corridor down the E20 towards St. Petersburg, we also have the equally large attack corridor from Vyborg heading south and towards St. Petersburg as well. And not only that, St. Petersburg is practically surrounded on two sides at this point by NATO forces, meaning that if a conventional war was to break out, we would assume that the northern front, as this would most likely be considered the Baltic or northern front of that conflict, would be extremely disadvantageous for the Russians, especially if NATO was able to get the upper hand immediately through a aggressive air campaign, knocking out Russian radar and surface-to-air missile sites, and also achieving air superiority. They would be able to turn the tide against the Russians very quickly, and the second largest city in Russia, which is pretty much equivalent to Kharkiv in the Ukraine war, would immediately be either besieged or it would nearly be surrounded, meaning that this is a great position for NATO to be in, not so great for the Russian Federation overall. And these bombers are really starting to send that message to the Russian Federation without a doubt. Another thing that I have Go ahead.
You know, also as well, like this is obviously a very big deal for like a show of force to like show the Russians that we do have the equipment and also the capabilities to fly right along their border, and also basically it's an attempted intimidation, and it should intimidate them because that is quite an ominous sight. But also, this was a good opportunity to get intel on what type of defenses or mechanisms the Russians might have had in place to deploy to ward off something like this happening. So do we know exactly what the Russians did to respond to this? Did they send up aircraft? aircraft, or did they send out maybe some type of forces or anything like that?
According to the information we have currently, we don't know of any aircraft that were scrambled to try and meet these B-52s, or at least stand off against them on the other side of the Russian border. We didn't hear anything about that, but we did hear about the interceptions by the Ministry of Defense that occurred over the Barents Sea at the exact same time, which apparently used MiG-29s and MiG-31s. The MiG-31 is a purpose-built interceptor. I have to show you all this one because we don't see this one a lot in the war, but this is a MiG-31, and this is what they used, at least a few of them, to intercept the B-52s in the Barents Sea. But these are a little bit rare. And also, not only that, a lot of people would think, wow, that looks like one hell of an aircraft. This thing is made out of raw stainless steel, and it is one of the most unmaneuverable aircraft in the history of modern fourth-generation aircraft that are built as technically a multi-role, although this thing is really an air superiority fighter and an interceptor. These things, however, do have raw speed. That's pretty much what the MiG-31 was made for, and that's why they were involved in the interception of the B-52s, is because they were able to get out there the quickest. The MiG-31s, like we see here, and also really quickly, some people will be like, wait a minute, I have seen this before in the war in Ukraine. You have, but you've only seen the modified version, the MiG-31K, which can fire off a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. This is a normal MiG-31 that we're seeing right here that is used in the interception role. But there is also MiG-29s that were sent up into the Barents Sea as well, which are incredibly common, and y'all have seen these things a dime a dozen through the war on all sides, Ukraine and Russia side. These are a fairly normal aircraft. These are also quite short range as well, compared to a lot of other fourth generation aircraft. So we are assuming that these B-52s actually got really, really close to Russian airspace near Murmansk, and that's why the MiG-29s were in range to be able to intercept them as well, and join the MiG-31s, which are purpose-built interceptors for that reason.
I wonder if the response time was as fast as NATO was expecting, because with it flying that close to the border, I have a suspicion in the back of my mind that maybe Russia might have not been as quick as we thought they were going to be, because remember, Russia's very incompetent, and also a lot of their equipment is deployed. So I wonder how on edge they really were when this happened. Did they know it was a drill, or were they going up actually preparing to maybe ward off this aircraft? From the sounds of it, it sounds like they might have been in a position to ward it off if the B-52 took a turn. But, you know, I wonder what the details were about this. We may hear it in the coming days, but I don't hear it right now.
And that is a good question. I would have to say it probably would not matter at all if they were in a position to try and intercept the B-52s, because there were a couple of things that probably showed the Russians that nothing was going to happen out of this, and it was to just send a message. These things are flying so close to the Finnish border, they're within SAM range of the Russians. And while many aircraft may be able to evade, at least in the Western world, like the F-18 Hornet, may be able to evade an S-300 and S-400 missile at a considerable range, the B-52 wouldn't be able to do that. And so the fact that it was flying so close to the border, they were probably fairly confident that any air defense batteries in the area would probably be able to engage and destroy them if anything happened. Another thing is that if a B-52 was actually preparing to attack the Russian Federation with a cruise missile, they would have been a lot farther away from the border. They pretty much would have been firing near, if I'm pronouncing this correct, Tampere in Finland, and firing the missiles from there, because like we've seen in the war in Ukraine, strategic bombers never get close to an active air defense zone. They fly hundreds of miles away and drop the cruise missiles from there, and then let the cruise missiles make their way to their targets. But the thing I was trying to get to y'all earlier is that the B-52 is no joke. Now, it is an incredibly old aircraft. It's actually the oldest flying aircraft in service right now with the U.S. Air Force. To get y'all an idea of how old the B-52 is, and y'all can see that people love the B-52 because they've written a whole entire novel on it on Wikipedia. But to give y'all an idea of how old a B-52 bomber is, this aircraft went into service, this one right here, in 1955. They're that old. Like, they're incredibly old. They're almost as old as World War II, only 10 years older than the end of the Second World War is when this aircraft first flew in military service. They're still flying today, but they fly with good reason. These things have a massive load capacity. These things can take off with a raw armament, and let me make sure that I get this correct, of 70,000 pounds of ordnance. So you can put anything in a B-52 as long as it weighs less than 70,000 pounds.
It's kind of interesting, though, that the thing hasn't been updated or upgraded to a new aircraft ever since that long ago. Like, I get it's still capable, but, you know, the military with their spending habits, you'd think that they would upgrade to a new one by now.
Well, that's a good question, but the truth is, a lot like the M16 and the 50 caliber, so far there just has been nothing out there yet that really can do what the B-52 does. And I say that as a bit of a caveat because we've retired a lot of these, and there's only about 52 of these left in service. We used to have hundreds of them back in the day, but that was kind of before the intercontinental ballistic missile really took off. So back in the day, our nuclear deterrent was the B-52 carrying a nuclear bomb, and they would literally just drop the bomb on the Russians as a gravity bomb instead of some sort of a missile or a multiple independent re-entry vehicle or something like that. But the B-52 doesn't have to be fast, and it really doesn't have to be that modern. Although, I will say this, the B-52 has come a long way since 1955. Let me see if I can find a picture really quickly of one of the earlier B-52s that were in service, because this is a B-52H. So notice how this B-52 looks, and let me try and find you a B-52B or a B-52A, because they were very different looking when they first got into service. And it's really interesting. Okay, here we go. Here's what the B-52... You know what? That's not a good enough picture. Let me see if I can get a better one. Let's see here. Here we go. Here's a B-52D, which is still pretty modified compared to the B-52B and the B-52A, but still showing you kind of how ancient this thing really is if it didn't have all of the upgrades and modifications that we've given them over their wildly long service life.
Yeah, it's crazy to see. Did they change the body up on the new one at all? Because this body of this one right here we're looking at in the photo looks like it's maybe taller or something, but I don't know if that's my imagination.
From what I understand, they changed a lot of the nose section of the aircraft, and they also changed the rear area of the fuselage, because the B-52 is so old that back in the day it was believed, and it was with fair reason that they believed this. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, I think it was further down on this Wikipedia. Let me show you all this. Back when the B-52 was in service, at the very beginning, it actually had a tail gunner. Like, no joke, that's how old the aircraft is that air-to-air missiles really didn't exist when this thing went into service. So they actually had a tail gunner that would sit up there in that little area, and he would remote control, use this quad 50 cal turret to be able to try and shoot down any enemy aircraft that would get behind the B-52. That's how old the thing is. They changed that heavily. The entire tail gunner section is gone on the B-52H. And let me see if I can go up here.
Now this isn't the bomber that the people sat in that like glass ball on the back and they had like the guns attached to it. This isn't that aircraft. This is a different one.
Yeah, that's very different, man. That is literally World War II. That's like a B-24 Liberator or a B-17.
We don't have that anymore, do we?
No, we don't have that anymore at all. The Russians, though, actually have it. Like, I'm not kidding. Let me go get you the Tu-95, because the Tu-95 is their version of the Stratofortress, but unlike us, they never retired the tail gunner. So let me see if I can find you a picture of the rear section of a Tu-95. Let me see here. Oh,
also, by the way, I see some folks talking about that's a B-29, Matt. I'll admit, I'm not an expert on the bombers. I know a little bit more about the fighter jets than I do the bomber aircraft. I've never really had an interest in these, but they're not saying that they're like trying to discount them or anything like that, but I just don't have a lot of knowledge about these in specific. But this thing has the glass ball tail gunner thing?
Not a glass ball tail gunner, but it has a tail gunner, because you can see the little windows. Let me see if I can enlarge this picture. You see the little windows right there where the mouse cursor is, and you can see the dual mounted, I think they're 23 millimeter guns right there. So they still have
interesting.
Yeah, they still have a tail gunner, although that's a completely obsolete premise in a modern air war. They would never like there would never be a jet that gets close enough to a Tu-95 to shoot at it with a tail gun. But nevertheless, the Russians still have theirs. They never upgraded their Tu-95s to get rid of them, but we upgraded the B-52 to get rid of our tail gunner, because if you look at the rear section of a modern B-52, like right here, you can see that they completely removed the tail gunner section. It just does not exist anymore on this plane.
Very interesting. But you got to admit, though, at least our aircraft has, like, it appears to be jet engines, while the Russians are using the props still. So that's a huge difference as well.
Oh, that's a massive difference, man. This thing, believe it or not, though, I think the Tu-95 is actually comparable in speed to the B-52, because it uses the, I forgot what it is. It's the counter-rotating propeller, something like that. It's what the Thunder Screech used that ended up making people like deaf on the ground. I forgot what those are called, but it uses those kinds of propeller engines, and so it actually gets a pretty considerable speed. But the B-52 is by far better, and it also carries a greater payload. So for that reason, this thing is still dangerous and very scary in a modern era war. Also, another thing, let me try and get you a little picture of it carrying its armament, or all of its armament laid out in front of it. I'm so sorry that I'm having to like slide up and down this page as quick as I can. Here we go. So this is all of the weapons that a B-52 can carry laid out in front of it. And you can see these special kinds of hard points that they have on the wings now for the B-52 to be able to carry different kinds of cruise missiles. This thing can also carry the stealth cruise missiles that we've been able to develop, much like the Rapid Dragon missiles. They're a different name. I forgot what they're exactly called, but they will be able to breach Russian air defenses without them being able to pick them up on radar and hit those targets without even a heads up or a warning. So this aircraft is very dangerous, and the fact that this thing flew that close to the Russian border today was making a very clear sign to the Russians. It wasn't making them think that they were going to get attacked, but it was giving them a very clear sign that if the United States wanted to start a war, or the Russians started a war, it is not going to be ending well at all. And really quickly to make a clarification there, I said if the United States wanted to start a war. The United States only fights defensive wars, especially with nuclear armed powers. We've never actually engaged the Russians in open war. If a war ever started, it would be because the Russians started it, but still, it sends the message that that war would not go well. And there's a new player in the game, at least around the area of Finland. But moving on.
And also, someone in the chat did mention as well, I really forgot about this because this seems to be a new thing we're doing in the modern era now. I'm pretty sure that someone in the U.S. military probably made a phone call to Russia before we flew that close to their border, because that seems to be common practice, sort of like the standard operation these days, to let the enemies know we're about to fly right past your border, so don't start shooting at us, because it's just a drill. And typically that seems to soothe things over a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened as well.
That's probably something that may have happened. I kind of doubt that a little bit, because with those kinds of aircraft incidents, they usually don't tell the other side that it's happening. They just send them on their way, because if you tell them it's happening, they're going to respond way quicker than they normally would. And with those kinds of things, sometimes you want to see how quickly they'll respond naturally. It gives an idea of their response time or their readiness, based off of how quick they're able to scramble the aircraft and get up there and intercept those bombers. So I don't know if they would have done that. With nuclear tests and things like that, there's always calls that go around. But with that kind of a situation, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they did, because once again they were flying so close to the Finnish border. That's probably likely, but who knows? Maybe we could get a comment on that one day and see if they did call forward. But I'm kind of on the fence on that. I don't know if they would have or wouldn't have, because I know the ones in the Barents Sea, no one called for those. Those things just flew on their way to the Barents Sea to see what the reaction time was, because that's incredibly normal to do that sort of a thing in the Barents Sea, and also all the way over here near the area of the Bering Sea, which sounds really similar. But we do the same things in those areas. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And it's time for us to move on down into the capital of Ukraine, inside of Kyiv, because we've actually heard something that is very interesting. We have heard that Zelensky says that the war might possibly go on for even longer. But he's also said some very interesting things with that statement. He has said that it's going to become an inevitable reality that Ukraine has to hold an election, even if the war does drag on, which is in complete contradiction, actually, to statements that have been made in the past about it is against the constitution of Ukraine, therefore we will never hold an election as the war goes on. We have also heard a really interesting statement from Zelensky where he said that if the war does last longer, it's going to be completely unacceptable if it lasts a long term. But the Ukrainians plan on ending the active phase of the war by the end of this year. And these statements are very, very interesting, I have to say. And we have been hearing a lot of different statements on this. A lot of people are saying that that may be from outside pressure. Some people are saying that it may be because of other things, but a lot of people are wondering, is it possible for the war in Ukraine to be ended by the end of this year? Is it possible for any of that to happen at all? Or is it going to be a positive outcome if that does happen? And a lot of people are saying that it actually is possible to accomplish that. Ukraine can end the active phase, or the hot phase of this war, by the end of this year. And some others are saying that's unlikely, but it's possible. Some people are saying that it's just simply not possible at all. And some are unsure and undecided. But this is probably one of the more interesting statements that we have heard recently, and it's really been thought-provoking for many. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this statement from Zelensky today, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So 41% of the audience said it's possible to end the hot phase of the war this year, while 27% said it's very unlikely, but also possible at the same time. And 22% said, no, it's simply not possible with Putin at the helm. And on this one, honestly, Zelensky has blindsided me with this one. I'm not really sure how he expects to end the hot phase of the war by the end of this year. That would only be a few months away. And honestly, I don't see that happening. Unless Ukraine plans on giving up some of the occupied territory, I don't see the hot phase ending by the end of this year because there's several different reasons. First of all, Putin has not exclaimed any desire to compromise with Ukraine whatsoever. He's saying he's going to take land, and that's going to be the final say in it, and that's going to be it. So I'm not really sure what has changed in the background here, but I don't think this is actually going to happen. I'm going to actually be with the 22%. I don't think it's possible with Putin at the helm unless Zelensky's ready to give up land, and I personally would not advise that. Of course, I'm not a Ukrainian. It's up to them whether or not they want to give it away, but after all the fighting and all the losses, I would not give up land that easily. So I'm with the 22%. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say a huge shout out to Just Chillin', who threw in a $250 donation to the fundraiser. Absolutely killing it. We're actually only about 1,300 away from the fundraiser goal right now. It is going. Like, it's getting there. And I think we're going to reach the goal, no doubt. But beyond that, I would say that I don't believe that an end to this war like that would be possible by the end of this year. Now, I have said that the war will end probably by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, but that's if the Ukrainians pretty much completely destroy Russian oil infrastructure and keep that up through the remainder of this year, and that the heavy battles that have been going on in Ukraine keep on going, and the economic degradation of the Russians keeps going. And right now, it looks like all of that is continuing on as normal, but the idea of Ukraine also being able to possibly reclaim all of their territories and end the conflict in victory by the end of this year, I'm very doubtful about that. If they were able to achieve that, I would think that it probably would be at the beginning of next year or midway through next year that they were able to reclaim their territories. But the war would, in effect, be won by the end of this year or the beginning of next year because the Russians will be in such a bad state by that point, victory would be practically a certainty. But nevertheless,
Do you take this the same way, though? When I heard Zelensky say that he's going to try to end the hot phase of the war by the end of the year, the first thing that came to my mind was that he might be considering giving up some of the occupied territory, but also sort of included in that, sort of the assumption within that statement is that they're basically saying they might give up Crimea as well, because if they're going to consider possibly giving up some land in the occupied territory on the border of Russia, it sounds like they might be considering foregoing Crimea as well, which would be a complete reversal and blindside to me from what we've heard in the war from Zelensky. I'm not sure if I'm reading too deep into it or what, but we're missing a crucial piece of information. What has changed to cause Zelensky to suddenly try to say this? Because to me, I actually disagree with the Enforcer. I think the war is going to go on for many more years until Ukraine's able to drive the Russians out or completely cause the collapse of the Russian economy. I think that's the only way to properly end it, unless Ukraine's going to make a compromise that people might be shocked to see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I would have to believe the best I can that the war probably could end by this year, but I don't think Ukraine's going to be reclaiming any territory if they tried to end it by this year. What would happen is that it's going to turn into the Donbass, but on a much larger scale, and it's going to go on for years where the Russians just occupy the eastern area of Ukraine, and that's that. That's what would probably happen if the conflict's hot phase ended by the end of this year. There's no way that Ukraine can reclaim their territory by the end of this year, even if they were in incredibly good shape and the Russians were falling apart, which they kind of already are at this point. There's no way for them to be able to have those massive frontline successes to be able to succeed. So I would have to say that, in my opinion, I don't think that that would be a good outcome, at least to me. And of course, I wanted to put this out there. A lot of people are thinking, oh, well, that wouldn't be too bad. It actually would be pretty bad, because if Ukraine ends the conflict and the Russians still control Crimea, forgetting everything else, let's just talk about Crimea. The West has not achieved any of its goals in supporting Ukraine over 2.5 years. We are pretty much at square one. The Russians still have the Black Sea Fleet port. The Russians will be able, at the end of the war, to move more ships down into the area of the Black Sea Fleet, maybe stripping other fleets in the Navy of their ships, but making sure to bolster the Black Sea Fleet back up to full strength, and they will still be able to sail from port into the area of the Mediterranean and force the United States into diplomatic concessions on topics in the Middle East, which is something that we do not want anymore. We want the Navy gone. We want the Black Sea Fleet out of there. And the whole reason that we've been supporting Ukraine so far in this war is because it is inherently within Western interest to try and get Ukraine in NATO, to try and pull them in for strategic and economic reasons, and also the major strategic reason of kicking the Russians out of any kind of a usable position for their Navy. That is something that I have to say is a little bit disappointing if the Ukrainians try to end it now, especially after the gung-ho kind of an attitude that Zelensky has had about the war will not end until they get back all of their territories, and then they're going to say, well, the war can actually end and we'll just, forget the territories. That seems a little weird to me.
I have a hard time. I have a hard time thinking that'll actually be the case. I wonder if maybe he's just saying that to give people hope, to think that maybe it could end by the end of the year. We could be looking too deep into it. But honestly, though, if Ukraine is looking for long-lasting peace, like Zelensky's always talking about, the only way to do that is to show Russia that they cannot gain anything from their invasion of Ukraine. Because if they're allowed to gain something, that incentivizes them to try again, because next time they might be able to get just a little bit more until they eat away all of Ukraine and then start eating away at the NATO borders if they decide to go even further down the line. So to me, I just don't really see this happening. Maybe Zelensky's just saying that out of just saying it, but I just don't see it going the way of Ukraine giving up land. That would be a shocker to me.
I would have to say it would be a pretty big shocker, but it kind of sounds like it would go that route a little bit but at the same time, he also put out an interview the other day, like it was literally just yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, Matthew, but he said in that interview that Ukraine can't give up land because that would be the easiest thing to do if the war was to end really quickly, is to just give up all the land, but they're not going to do that. And then he comes out today and says this as well, which makes it seem like land might be given up and the active conflict will end, and then it turns into the Donbass again, where it's an inactive no man's land for years over hundreds of miles of front line. It's almost a contradiction based on what was said yesterday versus what was said today. So I would have to say it's a very interesting kind of a ordeal that we're dealing with right now. I don't really know what to make of it, but I would say that a total victory by the end of this year, with Ukraine reclaiming all of its territory, or at least reclaiming Crimea, would be next to difficult, if not impossible to achieve, at least in my opinion. It will require more time to be able to do something like that, and so I hope that does address that fairly well. Not to be a downer on that, because of course we're pro-Ukrainian, but I would like to be a little bit realistic and speak about this on a realistic perspective. I don't think that they could achieve major war goals by the end of this year, such as the reclamation of Crimea. But nevertheless, I hope we were able to address that fairly well. And also on top of that, we have reached $1.8 thousand on the fundraiser. We are only $1.2 thousand away from the goal. Can we hit $3,000 by the top of this upcoming hour? We have 14 minutes to do it. Can we do it? I know the Lee Spring Army can. And you know what, Matthew? I think it's that time, Matthew. We haven't called up one of these in one hell of a long time. It's been about maybe a month and a half or so. It is time for a general order. It is time for a general order. If you have if you're a member of the Lee Spring Army and you have $5 to throw into this fundraiser, do it right now. The general order is in effect. I'm going to be throwing in a 20, actually, just to make sure to lead from the front. While you only have to throw in a 5, you can throw in however much you want. But I'm going to be throwing in a 20 because we got to get this thing over the top by the top of the hour. Top of the hour, over the top. That's what we're going to be doing. So that general order is now in effect. If you have $5 to throw into the fundraiser, make sure to throw it in right now if you're a part of the Lee Spring Army. Spread the word. A general order is in effect. And the donations are flying in.
Look at that. It's going fast, man. This thing's going fast now.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, we're going to be hitting 3,000 not here before long. But while the general order goes into effect, we do have some pretty interesting questions and also some top donors so far. Well, actually, we'll get into the interesting questions and then the top donors, because there's probably going to be some top donors coming in right now. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first question of the night, we have one from Vorian174. He says, "Good evening, enforcers, and I hope you're both well." Hey. And apparently Russia dropped a 3-ton SAR bomb. And do you have anything on that?
a 3-ton Tsar bomb. Well, the Tsar bomb was a nuclear bomb, the biggest one that was ever blown up in history. So I did not hear about them blowing up a Tsar bomb. If you're talking about a Fab 3000, I have heard about them dropping some of those on Ukraine. That's actually become a little bit common. Let me see if I can find that here. Here we go. That's the Fab 3000. I have seen some of these dropped. Most notably, we've actually seen several of those get dropped a little while ago back onto the village of Velika Pisarivka. Several of those Fab 3000s got dropped on that village when the Free Russian Army was inside of Belgrade. And we have seen a couple of more being used around the area of Lipsy. But we haven't seen a load of them being used. I mean, it's not like it's incredibly common. Usually the Fab 500 is still the go-to glide bomb, but they have modified some Fab 3000s with glide kits, and we have seen a limited number of those being used. But with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. Very interesting
Man,
question.
we are getting so close to goal as well. Do you see this, man? We are creeping up on it so fast.
Dude, we are only 100 away right now. We are getting close. And I got to say, I don't know what the general order was doing because I was trying to answer that question and Google some stuff so I couldn't see. But holy moly, dude, there's been some massive donations in the general order, man. Goodness gracious. And now we are only... Let's see, we are still $100 away from the $3,000 goal. Oh, dude, Old Warrior 300. We are $9 away. We are $9 freaking dollars away from the goal. Can we hit it? I know we can.
Let's go. Let's go. We got it. It's coming in. It's coming in.
It's rolling. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It's gotta happen. It's just $9. It's just we hit the goal, baby.
Igor, we hit the goal.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see we finally hit the goal. It's absolutely incredible. We have hit $3,000 in just
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Absolutely crazy and beautiful to see that the Lee Spring Army has done it once again. It has defied the odds across the entirety of the internet. And it has been able to once again reach another goal on another Sunday night fundraiser. That is absolutely crazy to me. I mean, it's really crazy because we have run dozens of these fundraisers. We are getting close to, I think, about like the 80th something fundraiser that we've run on this channel on a Sunday, and they're still doing amazing work. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And so I gotta say, huge shout out to all of y'all once again. And before we start shouting out those top donors, Matty, I think we had one more question to answer, and then we're going to give a shout out to all of the top donors so far on this fundraiser tonight.
All right, so let's get that next question here. And this one goes to Eugene Minton. And also, by the way, if you have a question for us tonight, no super chats. It's all donations to the fundraiser tonight. So be sure to tag @EnforcerMatt and put your question behind it. And there's a good chance we'll get around to your question tonight as well. But with that, jumping into Eugene's question, he says, what interceptor did the USSR build to try and intercept the SR-71, and did they ever succeed?
Let's see, what interceptor? I'm trying to think of what it was. They gave some to the North Koreans, and they actually got close to blowing it up. Dang, let me think. Soviet. Wait a minute. No. It was the MiG-31, I think. Or it was the MiG-25. Let me check both of them. The MiG-25, let's see here. Entered service in 1970. So this would be the one. So this one is the fastest serial produced aircraft behind the SR-71. So if there was an aircraft out there that was made to attempt an intercept on the SR-71, it would have been this one, the MiG-25 Foxbat. The MiG-25 Foxbat is the fastest interceptor ever made in the world. This thing is also made a lot like the MiG-31 out of raw stainless steel. So it is one of the heaviest aircraft out there, but it actually scared the United States greatly when this thing got introduced in service in 1970, because looking at it, it had a very large wing profile, and the shape of its wings, along with its control surfaces, suggested that this was a high maneuverability aircraft, which was really concerning for the West, because at the time, we were still using F-4 Phantoms, and nothing looked like it would be able to compete with a MiG-25 that was in Soviet service. And so the United States freaked out, and we dumped billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars, into the F-15. And that's why the F-15 is still pretty much the undefeated air-to-air champion in the world. It has only been shot down a couple of times by ground fire, but in general, the F-15 has actually never been beaten in air-to-air combat. It is the uncontested winner in an air-to-air confrontation. Not a single one of them has been lost to enemy action, and it's done incredibly well. And the entire reason why this thing exists is because of the MiG-25, and because we thought it was really good. But the Soviets didn't build this thing really for maneuverability, like we built the F-15 for, and we also built the F-15 for raw speed as well. The entire design concept around the MiG-25 was sacrifice everything for raw straight line speed. The idea behind the MiG-25 is that it's a supersonic interceptor, and so it is supposed to be able to take off from an airfield, rapidly gain altitude to about 30, 40, or 50,000 feet, and then get up to speeds in excess of Mach 2, even close to Mach 3, to be able to try and get as far out as possible to those incoming bombers, and then start shooting them down. That was the idea behind the production of the MiG-25. Did it ever really pan out? Not really. The MiG-25 never really got used as an interceptor. The Iraqis actually used the MiG-25, I believe, during the Gulf War in attempt at trying to ambush a F-15 with these things. The F-15 slaughtered them. So, you know, that kind of was like the showdown of the century. It was the MiG-25 versus the F-15. The F-15 was literally built to compete with the MiG-25. The MiG-25 was built to compete with nothing, and the MiG-25 got murdered like it was expected. But let me see here. Let's see. March 1982, an Iranian F-4 was damaged by an Iraqi MiG-25, but we need to go to the Gulf War. Yeah! Dude, here we go. We got to the Gulf War. So let's see here. 2 Iraqi Air Force MiG-25s were shot down by the U.S. Air Force F-15s on the 19th of January. The MiGs attempted to hide from the F-15s by using chaff and electronic jammers in order to engage the F-15s untargeted. However, the F-15 pilots were able to just simply reacquire the 2 MiG-25s and shot down both of them. It looks like they got mogged on, cry about it, and also a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, that's the Iraqi Air Force, and the Iraqi Air Force sucks. Yeah, it does now, but back in the day when the Gulf War happened, the Iraqi Air Force was one of the most well-experienced air forces in the world at that time, because they had just gotten out of the Iran-Iraq War, which was a massive, grueling conventional war, a lot like the one in Ukraine, and they came out of it. Well, it was an indecisive victory for both sides, but they came out of it very well trained and very well equipped as far as a ground army at the time went. But of course, when going up against the United States and we have unlimited air superiority compared to the Iraqis, and also a massive technological advantage, they got crapped on pretty badly, and then they ended up looking like a joke. But beyond that, this is the aircraft that was made to try and intercept an SR-57, an SR-71. It never really reached the speed to be able to intercept an SR-71, but I think one aircraft that did get close. Let me check this really quickly. No. Actually, I'm thinking different. I'll show you all this aircraft though. Let's see. It was the English Electric. Hang on. 1 second. I gotta try and think to put this one in because I haven't looked at it for a while. So one aircraft that was wildly fast, at least for its time, was the English Electric Lightning, seen here. This was a British, I believe it was a second, no, it was a third generation, I believe. It was like the very dawn of the third generation fighter aircraft that was made. It was only able to carry 2 air-to-air missiles. It was able to carry Red Tops, which were a British-made air-to-air missile. It was pretty chunky, actually. But nevertheless, this thing was fast enough that it was actually able to catch up to the Concorde in flight and keep up a pace with it. I think that it also, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it also ended up trying to intercept an SR-71. I'm not really sure if it succeeded. But then there was another aircraft, let me go find this one. There was another aircraft that actually flew alongside an SR-71 at a time, which is the Saab 37 Viggen, which is the fighter aircraft that the Swedes had before they got the Gripen that we all know and love today. But this aircraft right here, let me get a really good picture of it to make sure to show it off as best as I can, because it is pretty cool. Dang, man, they don't really have a lot of good pictures of this thing. Well, that's probably the best one. This thing is actually pretty interesting. It was pretty advanced for its time, and it actually has a reverse thruster, which is really unique for a fighter plane. But this aircraft was actually able to catch an SR-71, but the caveat to that is that the only reason it caught up and flew alongside an SR-71 is because the SR-71 had a critical engine failure in flight and ended up rapidly descending in altitude and speed near the Gotland Island, and the Swedes scrambled some Viggens to go intercept the SR-71, and because it was traveling at a low altitude at such a low speed, that's the only reason why the Viggens ever got close. But this is technically the only plane, regardless of the speed and everything, that technically caught an SR-71, the only one in history. But I hope that does address that live chat very well. That was a really good question, and I hope you enjoyed that little SR-71, SR-71 rabbit hole that we had there, because it is a little interesting to talk a little bit about the SR-71. But with that, before we move back into the news, and especially the Middle East news, because we have a lot to cover down there, I want to make sure that we address some of the top donors of this stream tonight, because unbelievably, this fundraiser has been able to get up to a whopping $3.5 thousand before the top of the hour. That is $1,000 nearly above goal. It's actually about $850 above goal exactly, but still, I like to round it up because it sounds nicer, but we still have to give a massive shout out to each and every one of y'all who supported this fundraiser tonight, whether the donations be incredibly big or whether they be a little bit on the smaller side. Every single bit has come together to make this fundraiser total a reality, and we have to thank every single one of y'all, whether we're able to call y'all off or not, for the amazing support that y'all have given tonight to the nonprofit Nova Ukraine, which is still doing incredible work inside of Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that gives y'all a proper respect, a due respect for y'all's incredible support tonight. But Matthew, we have to be able to call them out, so call them out, call them out.
All right, so we're going to call them out. Oh, man. We got some big donors today. Oh. But anyways,
man.
Seriously speaking, we have had a tremendous success on tonight's fundraiser, thanks to the LSA, and thank you all once again for the generosity. And so far, the top donors of the night are Just Chillin' and Murray Peacock, who each put in a $250 donation. Huge shout out to Murray and Just Chillin'. And then Hal Rose threw in a $100 donation. Some guy called the Enforcer also threw in a 100, along with Snow White, Ed Olson, Old Warrior, BC Skyman, Eric Hutchins, Old Warrior once again, as well as BCR. And then we had a $50 donation from William Cullison, as well as Nick LSA, DCC Prime 1, Purple Gerbil, Greg Carrier, Dad Good, Axel K, Andy L, also Zach G, Carl Patterson again, Mike Smith, Andy L once again, and also Craig Canton, Gene Kustra, and also another 50 from Andy L. So once again, huge shout out to the top donors tonight, and also huge shout out to everybody we weren't able to call off, because tonight was a big success for a really great charity, Nova Ukraine, and we appreciate it very much. Another successful Sunday. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it is absolutely crazy to think that we've been able to fundraise $3.5 thousand in just an hour. And of course, I got to give a huge shout out tonight to all the top donors. Tonight, Matthew, was crazily enough like the century night, because almost every single super chat was a 50 or 100, but a lot of them were hundreds, really. And I was like, dang, that is a lot of $100 donations to that fundraiser. But still, that is absolutely incredible. It's wonderful to know that people are continuing to support Ukraine here on this channel, and we got to give y'all a massive thanks once again for having huge hearts for Ukraine and continuing to support fundraisers for nonprofits that are still operating over there and helping out as best they can. If it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to have such an impact on the kind of news that we cover, and I got to give y'all a massive shout out and a huge thanks for that once again. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least best I can. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little segment here and on down into the Middle East, because things have been continuing today from the attack that the Houthis made on Israel, and it looks like things are still continuing on, a tit for tat of sorts. Moving us on down into the area of Al-Hadida, we have to recap what happened yesterday in Al-Hadida before we can get on into the rest of what's happened today. So moving on into the port, we got to see that the Israelis, or more so satellite footage, was able to show us the aftermath of the attack on Al-Hadida, and the entire oil facility was destroyed. I'm not kidding. Every single silo, except for the two that we pointed out on stream last night that it appeared to have been untouched, have been enveloped and engulfed in flame and completely destroyed. These two little oil tanks right here at the very south of this oil farm are the only ones left. You can see on satellite footage that every single one has either burned to the ground or it's still burning at this very moment. And you can also see in larger form one second. You can also see in larger form down here in a more zoomed out satellite picture that a massive black cloud of toxic oil smoke is pretty much covering half of Al Hadaida at this moment from that strike. We were also able to get first-hand footage of the moment that the strikes actually hit. This was actually pretty obscure footage yesterday. We didn't even see the first strikes happen in Al Hadaida, but here's what it looks like when those explosions started happening. So here's the clip. And we see the mushroom clouds rising from the initial explosions. But in a second, it's about to get big. Big. Oh, dang! Another one! And another! Oh!
Also, are these all the semi-trucks we saw yesterday on the map? And you were like, what are all these semi-trucks doing, like, lined up in around the port?
I think so, Matthew. These things look like junkers, dude. That one's rusted over.
Man, I was expecting to see some proper, like, semis. These things are rough.
Man, I think the Houthis are in rough shape, man. Like, I think Houthi-controlled Yemen is not a good place.
That's why they're trying to steal all the stuff off the cargo ships. They're trying to get, like, a morsel of, like, some modern goods.
Dude, and meanwhile, man, while this giant fireball right there is blowing up, there's some guy driving through the port, running people over, going, "Oh, no, Salim!" You know, it's like...
And the screaming commences. Although, understandably so, that's a huge fire.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking big. Even the dogs are running.
I bet you can feel the heat from even where this guy's standing.
I would think so. We're going to have to go back to, oh, David, you know, we're going to have to go back to that guy really quickly, because that was a good laugh to get out of this whole thing. So let me see if we can get that clip. Nope, that's not it. Oh, hang on. I'm going to have to go on a little scavenging hunt for that one. Here we go. I think this is the one. Nope, that's not it. How in the world am I clicking on every one but the right one? Is it this one? Nope, it's got to be the literal one that I did not click up here. Is it? Is it?
That's the Lebanon explosion, I think.
Yeah, that's the Lebanon. Where the hell is it? Is it this one? Hold up. Here we go. This is it. Here we go.
The guy couldn't even talk straight, man. He was choking on air. He was like, ah, yeah.
Dude, he went, oh, it's just like, dude, it's like, calm down. It's like the explosions have happened. There's no going back. But moving on from that, you know, something that was really shocking is that not only did we get to see the initial explosions, not only did we get to see the massive fire afterwards, and not only did we get to see the damage from satellite, we also got to see something that was really interesting as well. The Israeli view of the attack. The Israelis already published pretty much the hit cameras from the missiles, so we get to see the camera view of the missile, or the bomb more so, as it's flying into its target in Al Hadaida port. We have never gotten this kind of comprehensive footage from all sides this quickly, so this is literally every perspective of that strike. The Israeli perspective, the Houthi perspective, the perspective of the satellites in orbit, literally everything in between we have gotten today. So here's the clip.
دولة ألفا بشلوش كل بحورك أربع بنصات
Oh my.
Oh my.
ألفا قامي أربع.
And that's the end of that clip, but those were the Israeli guided ordnance that were flying into Al Hadaida yesterday and ended up striking the depots. So now that we've caught up to speed with everything that we didn't see yesterday at the Al Hadaida port attack, we're now going to be moving out of Western-controlled, Houthi-controlled Western Yemen, and we're now going to be moving a little bit further north, as Houthis have immediately made a response today to what Israel did at Al Hadaida yesterday. Of course, and that was response to what the Houthis did to Israel by flying a drone into a high-rise in Tel Aviv and ended up killing, I believe, one person that I know of. I think there was an additional one later on. We haven't been able to confirm that. And then there was a couple of dozen wounded. So Of course, I want to put this out there really quickly because I've seen people on Twitter, once again, making it sound like the Israelis are the warmongers here. The Houthis were the ones to strike first in this exchange. The Houthis ended up hitting a building in Tel Aviv, killing one person at a minimum and wounding dozens. The Israelis have now responded by striking back at the Houthis and hitting an oil depot within the area of Al-Hodeida port. And now the Houthis act enraged, and a lot of people are acting like the Israelis are the aggressors. And now the Houthis are firing back at the Israelis because they retaliated against the initial Houthi attack that occurred about 2 or 3 days ago. So we got to see that the Arrow 2 anti-ballistic missile system near to the area of Eilat intercepted some Houthi missiles in the southern region today.
That sounds like the seagull from Finding Nemo out there in the distance.
Mine. And there's the Arrow. And in a second, we're about to see that Kupush. Oh, okay. I guess we don't see that.
Yeah, man. I want to take their word for it. Trust me, bro.
Trust me, bro. Trust me. We also get to hear that Israeli air forces are on high alert, just to put that out there. And then meanwhile, in the northern area of the country, we also got to see some Iron Dome interceptions still being conducted against the Hezbollah forces that are firing rockets and bombs into northern Israel. So here's that clip. And there's the interceptions right there. Very interesting to see. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But it's nice to know the Iron Dome is still working, but of course the area is still in some pretty high tensions. But meanwhile, while we're seeing that those high tensions are rising, we're still hearing some very interesting things out of Ukraine. And a lot of people are still talking about Zelensky's statements right now and wondering, should Ukraine concede 15% of the occupied territory to end the war? And a lot of people are wondering, well, we're wondering, would y'all be a favor of Ukraine having that kind of a deal or not in the long run? And a lot of y'all are not big fans of that. Some people are saying that that's only if Ukraine gets NATO membership, and some people say that that's only if the war ends badly. But a lot of people have thrown in their comments and takes on this, and I got to say that that is very interesting. And I got to say, Matthew, what are people saying, and what are you thinking about it?
All right, so on this poll question here, it's a hypothetical. If Ukraine could concede 15% of occupied territory to end the war, the question is, would you support the deal? So 53% said no, Ukraine cannot give away territory under any circumstance, while 32% said yes, but only with Ukraine NATO membership included in that, and 7% said only if the war goes badly. So on this one, there's a little bit of an added twist here. If NATO was to offer Ukraine membership, in addition to giving away 15% of their land, would that make it okay? And honestly, in my opinion, that would not. While NATO membership would give Ukraine more protection, that would not guarantee that Russia would not come back and start attacking them again. In my mind, the only way to really do this and deter Russia in the future is to make sure they don't gain any incentive from invading Ukraine, which means they get no land whatsoever. So I'm actually with the 53%. I don't think Ukraine can give away territory if they actually care about peace in the future. Now, if they're looking at a short-term goal, I guess they could give away some territory. In short-term, it would be peaceful in Ukraine, maybe for about 5 to 10 more years. But, Russia is going to try this again. I'm pretty confident about that. So I'm with the 53%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that Ukraine cannot give away any territory. I would believe that it's very important for Ukraine to reclaim all of their lost lands by the Russian Federation since 1991. It is very important not only for Western strategic interests that Crimea is secured, but it's also important that the Donetsk region is also secured once again as well. I would say that that's a very important kind of a step forward to make for NATO, really for Ukraine as well. So I would not be a big fan of them ceding any territory. I believe that all territory should be reclaimed, or that some sort of a diplomatic settlement should be made where Ukraine regains all of its territory that has been lost so far by the Russian Federation. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into something interesting that I've been seeing in the chat. And I've been seeing this, Mandy. I don't know what it is, But for some
I don't
reason,
either, man. Something in the water tonight or what? I've had two people give me a really hard time tonight that were actually like been here for a while. One person got mouthy with me because they cussed out someone who said something in the live chat, and they got timed out for it. Then they came back and wanted to get mouthy with me over getting timed out. So I'm like, what the hell's up with that? And then someone else was getting mouthy over the poll. It's like, what the hell, man? It's like, y'all, some of these people have been here for such a long time. It's like, y'all know how we operate. We give people a fair chance to say what they want within reason, but it's like, we don't take, crap either. It's like, if you're going to lob insults at us, that's not going to work.
yeah, I was seeing that someone said, "Oh, I've been here busting balls for 2 years." It's like there's a different like it's like one, busting balls isn't really a thing that we're for on this channel because busting balls gets people pissed off. Like I don't know if anyone's ever watched the show The Sopranos, but does anyone ever realize that when anyone busted each other's balls in The Sopranos, someone got their ass beat like right afterwards, and it was the person busting balls? Like no one takes that well, so I don't know what that person was talking about. And then someone else apparently took an issue with the poll, and then wanted to take an issue with Matthew now after being here for 2 years. It's like, that's a little weird. A really bizarre.
It's a full
night.
moon. I'm seeing people say it's a full moon. Maybe it is outside. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, when I saw the first one go at me, I was like, what the hell's up with that? I've seen this guy before. And then the second one came at me. I was like, what the hell? I was like, come on. It's like, what's going on? So hopefully that's all, man. Hopefully it's just two people.
Yeah, hopefully so, because I was paying attention to that. And I was like, well, what the hell's going on with that? I was trying to stay quiet on it. That's why I was kind of getting distracted here and there. And then also I'm seeing something else, Matthew, that I gotta say is, and some people have brought it up, it is kind of looking a little bit like it's trying to shove something in everyone's face, if you know what I'm getting at.
I've been seeing it. I'm not sure if it's like intentional or maybe just their way of like throwing in support, but I don't know. It's just we explained it last night, so I hope it's understood.
I hope so, but I've seen a lot of people bringing that up as well, and then that seems to also be getting people angry in the chat. One thing I gotta say, though, is it's the Lee Spring Army. And don't worry, and we went over this last night, don't get angry. We are here, and we are moderating. We see every single one of y'all, the thousands of y'all that come in every night, the 43,000 people who have been here so far, and every single live chat that comes in the entire stream. We can't address every single one of them, but Matthew and me actually do read every single live chat that comes in, the good and the bad. So if we see something and we're not really liking it too much, we will tend to it. You don't have to cuss people out. You don't have to take matters into your own hands, and certainly don't cuss us out. All right, I've got to put this out there. This is not Burger King. This is not have it your way, where you can cuss out the people who run the show. That's not how it works. If you cuss us out, you go, because I'm not going to be here getting cussed at, and I'm not going to have Matthew getting cussed at either. So I hope folks understand.
Although to be fair though, it's just been two people. Like, I want to make it clear. Like, sometimes I sound frustrated when I'm dealing with a couple of people, and I hope y'all don't read my responses to like the one or two people I was talking to and think, oh, Enforcer Matt's an asshole or something like that. I'm like trying to handle it the best I can here and not get too mouthy with the people, because I understand like sometimes people have bad days and stuff like that, but at the same time it's like, we're people too. We don't want to get cussed out over someone having a difference of opinion. So it's just two people, man. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, but I feel like I have to make that public announcement because maybe some others will take an example and view them as martyrs. Who knows? But I'm just kidding around about that. But with that, it is time for us to get back into the news and up into Ukraine, because we have a load of news to cover up here. And we were able to hear that finally another German Patriot system has arrived in Ukraine. And isn't it beautiful? Isn't it something?
Fantastic, man. I love to see it. They look so new and modern.
They look so American, so freedom, so free. But moving on from that, we're now moving on into our location unknowns, where we also got to see some Chechen soldiers in training with the Sheikh Mansour Battalion to fight for Ukraine. We can also see that all of them have AKMs, pretty cool. And we can also see them here still conducting training, going through the motions and making sure to get ready for what's to come. That guy actually had dude, that guy's got my 22 MP5 with like the fake suppressor on it.
Man, I think that is. Man.
I think that is.
We know that suppressor screws off and it's just like a aluminum tube. It's a fake.
Yeah, dude, it's, oh my goodness. We see them evacuating a simulated wounded. We can see them treating wounded as well. Very nice to see their training is going well. Moving on from that, we also got to hear today that the 100th T-90M has been destroyed. At the beginning of the war, we assumed that Russia had about 50 of these. They lost those 50, and now they have lost an additional 50 others that have been refitted in the war on top of that. Very nice to hear, and we love to know that the Ukrainians have been able to knock out so many Russian forces over such a short amount of time, really. And we can see them here showing all of the T-90Ms that have been destroyed on film.
Man, this is some crazy fire going on with those.
Man, I'm telling you, man, the fire and fury from the T-90s that have been destroyed. Hopefully they show that T-90 that got mogged on by that Bradley. You know what I mean? Like, that was a really good one back in Spitove.
Man, I'm telling you what, they're laying it on them. Fire and fury like the world's never seen.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, my voice is kind of feeling a little rough tonight, so it's hard to do, like, voices. It feels really strained. It's a good thing that it's a Sunday, because that means that my voice gets a break for tomorrow. But still...
At least you can still have the voices in your head, at least. If you can't say them, at least you can hear them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Like, but moving on from that, we also got to see this Ukrainian T-80 with the Cope cage on it, which is really unique. But really nice to see a Ukrainian T-80 BV in action. Really cool. Moving on from that, we also got the Russian casualty report as well. And, ooh, it was high.
Oh! Wow, man. 9 Bobcats. I'm telling you what, it's a good Sunday. Full moon or not, it's a good Sunday with 9 Bobcats. Also, they're back over 1,000 troops once again.
1,100 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 46 armored personnel carriers, 68 supply trucks, 9 main battle tanks, 44 artillery pieces, 52 drones, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and the 9 Bobcat skid steers. Today was a very good day. And we can, of course, see Ankit Gupta saying, "What are Ukraine figures?" Cope.
Oh, well, here's the Russian figures, though. What are the Russian figures meaningless? It's like they're right here.
Dude, this is a guy right here, man, who thinks that, this guy right here, and Ankit Gupta, he thinks birds are fake. He thinks they're drones. But beyond that,
man.
You know something interesting, Matthew, is that there's actual people out there who believe that all birds in the world are government drones. And it's like, how in the world do people duck hunt then? It's like how did people successfully duck hunt and eat the ducks if they're drones? You know, it's like I don't get that. But anyways, with that, really nice to see these kinds of losses, incredibly high losses, beautiful to see, and good to know the Ukrainians are still inflicting some pretty decent losses on them Ruskies. And meanwhile, we got to see the 36 Marines up in the area around Vovchansk firing off some MLRS rockets. And we got to mute that, but we can see them rolling up into position. We see them backing that thing up. They whip that thing into the firing position. We now see him setting up the launcher. See them still getting the grad ready. Christian Cruz said, that's why birds sit on power lines. They're charging. Oh, man.
Man, that could be a good explanation for it.
Man, you know something that's funny is that that conspiracy theory went pretty crazy because they said that the entire Wuhan whirlybird thing was so that way the government could get everyone to go home, so that way they could go out and recharge the birds. It's like, what? It's like wait a minute, what? It's like, dude, I couldn't even believe that. It's like I couldn't believe it originally, but I certainly could not believe that. It's like that is just insane right there. But we see them firing off those rocketa. Beautiful to see. And man, I'm telling you what, man. YouTube's number reporting thing, man, is so aggravating because we are way higher than what we're at right now. I know I keep bringing this up every night, y'all, but YouTube updated for last night because many of y'all will know that we reached a peak viewership last night of 5.5 thousand people. YouTube updated, and now they say that last night there were 7.9 thousand people on the stream at its peak. And I know it's doing that again tonight. I hate that because I would love to know how many of y'all are actually here, so that way I know how many of y'all I'm really talking to. So for now, we're kind of guessing. I'm guessing that there's probably like 6,000 or 7,000 of y'all here right now, but I don't really know for certain. It says 5.3, but I know that's not true. But moving on from that, we also got to see a Russian talking about Vovchansk while he's in Vovchansk, and it looks like he's not having a fun time in Vovchansk.
Вот отсюда я тебе снимал видео. Здесь мы были. А вот здесь сидят пидоры. Вы все думаете, что вот эту балаклаву носим, потому что выебываемся? Нет, здесь столько мух, это просто ужас. Мухи, они, как сказать, трупные, они лезут в лицо, везде лезут, короче, нахуй. Они так надоели, ужас, нахуй. Поэтому...
Also, I think this guy is wearing a mask because he looks like Jason Voorhees on the small part of the face we can see. Like, do you see that, Matthew? It looks like he crawled out of the swamp.
That guy looks sketchy. I'm not gonna lie, this guy looks sketchy.
I mean, yikes.
Ну и трупный запах.
He is a русский, after all.
Надоело.
Русский солдат, блин.
Тут кругом трупы. 29-го я потерял последнего нашего бойца, Ромку.
Excuse me.
Роман.
Bless you.
Из 300 нас оставалось двое. 29-го.
Oh, there's one of those flies right there he was talking about. It's just crawling on his brim.
Он погиб. 200. Так что из 300 я остался один. Ну, пришло пополнение в количестве 30 человек. И нас осталось уже 10. Так что все хорошо у меня. Пока жив. Я тебе обещал вернуться. Внучка надо на ноги поставить еще. Я это все помню. Вот моя РДшечка. Вот моя касочка. Нам 2 раза повторять не надо. Нам сразу похуй. Вот такая у меня каска теперь.
Oh my goodness.
He's acting like he wasn't phased by that. It's like, come on, that's
работают по нам.
Yeah, dude, I would have been
Везде
phased by that.
работают.
And so with that, that's the end of that clip, but a very interesting look at what's going on out there in Vovchansk, at least on the Russian side of things. With that, we're now going to be moving on up into the area of northern Ukraine, where we got to see that Russian forces ended up getting hit pretty badly. Wait, hang on. Sorry, correction there. This is actually a Ukrainian D-30 that was apparently hit. The Ukrainians fired from the position. It's one of those little pre-prepared positions where they keep the D-30 and then they have a hardened shelter nearby. But you see the Ukrainians covering it up with foliage, but of course the Lancet's soon going to hit it. And we see the Lancet hit it after the Ukrainians moved into their pre-prepared dugout. And unfortunately, it looks like the ammunition caught on fire and started to burn. Of course, the Ukrainian crew is just fine. But still, it's unfortunate to see that they lost a D-30 artillery piece here in this northern front. Also, isn't it a little interesting, Matthew, the imagery that the Russians use in their videos? I mean, it's a very specific kind of a look. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is kind of... Oh, I just looked up and saw it. That is interesting that they try to, say certain things about Ukraine, but You know, that looks very reminiscent of something
Oh.
else. Oh, God.
Geschlägt bei Leitman in die Deutschen, but it's like,
That is
dang.
not serious.
The Russians aren't really hiding it that much anymore. But moving on from that clip and further down the lines and into the area around Bakhmut, we also got to see the Ukrainians ended up destroying a Russian mine layer, which was pretty nice to see. Well, you see them hitting it right there, and soon it's about to go nuclear. Oh, oh my goodness.
That's a big boom.
That is a really big boom right there. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Very nice to see that they were able to hit that Russian mine layer, or kind of like an MLRS mine layer right there. And moving on down into southern Bakhmut near Kurdyivka, we also got to see a Russian bomb get blown up, but in a really nice way. Let me explain. This is a Ukrainian drone we're watching right here, and what is about to happen is that they're about to find in this tree line a Russian Fab 250 that accidentally was dropped on top of their own forces, but it didn't end up blowing up. So the Ukrainian drone decides to hit it and blow it up on the Russians, so that way it wipes them out. So really, in the end, the Russians blew up the Russians. It was just a Ukrainian drone that kind of set off the catalyst. And we can see the Fab 250 down there. It hits, boom, a literal 250 explosion right there in that tree line. Beautiful.
Slower.
And slow, and it's wonderful to see. Good to know. And moving on from that and out of the area of Kurdyivka and on down to the area of Avdiivka, we got to see a golf cart getting hit by an FPV drone, which is, of course, kind of normal, but it's one of those Chinese golf carts.
Man, what is going on? Like, what is happening with this? Like, he's running. Did he just run away from the go-kart?
He did. They're gone. They're getting the hell out of there.
Man, why would you leave that piece of equipment behind? It's so valuable.
Man, it's such a good piece of tech. I mean, there's so many down there for free. You can just go grab one, you know, like get whichever one you want. But we can see another drone flying around, taking a look around the place, taking a little gander at it. And we can see the Desert Cross burning right there after they hit it again. And that is a successful hit right there. Very nice to see and good to know that they were able to knock out another Russian go-kart near Avdiivka. Meanwhile, they also got to witness the two-story cope cage. The Russians are building up, and they are now adding cope cages to protect the cope cages. Check this out. This is a first that we've ever seen. There's the original cope cage on the turret, and this giant one up here is the second cope cage.
Let's see. They're leaving the scene. Oh,
Oh.
They left the scene and then they left everything.
They left the scene and then they left life. Pretty wild to see, but
And they checked out. They
Yeah,
didn't check back in.
man, you check in, but you don't check out. But moving on from that into
What's that from?
the B movie. It's from the
Oh,
B
that's
movie.
right. That's Jerry Seinfeld.
But with that, we also got this really cool clip of a KS-19, which is an old anti-aircraft gun that's about 80 years old, being mounted onto a truck and pretty much being used as a mobile SPG, which is really cool to see. And of course, this was presented to us by none other than the amazing folks over at United 24. Also, really quickly, I'm going to have to make a comment on this because I'm seeing the third person tonight who's come in and done this, and I'm sadly going to have to start putting my foot down on this. We're seeing a lot of accounts with religious themes to them, and they are coming into the stream and they are trying to push religious messaging. Of course, we gave the disclaimer last night that we're Christians, but at the same time, this channel has a no politics rule, but that also extends to religion as well. There are two things that are talked about as a civil thing to do in public, not to talk about. Do not talk about politics or religion. And while we may be a news channel, we make sure to adhere to those rules, and while we have our own personal religious and political beliefs, that is no one's business to know really a lot about that or any details. We are here to report the news. We're seeing right now a little bit of a push of some accounts that are coming in here. I've seen about 3 of them so far that Matthew's had to ban, that have some kind of religious theming to them. And at this moment, I'm sadly going to have to start putting our foot down about as strongly on that as we do on politics as well.
You know, I think I'm realizing here something. If you notice, literally the moment after I had said something to the one person there about the statements about the religious discussions, then you saw a bunch of other accounts start pouring in right afterward. I think that may be a new trolling attempt or something like that. And they know it's putting us in a tough spot because obviously we're Christians, so we don't want to ban them. And I think the bots have found a loophole here to try to harass people and harass us, and also put us in a tough spot and not really know how to handle it, because it's really kind of clever that they're coming in like this.
Yeah, it really is, because this is how this sort of a thing goes. And I'm going to make this very clear because I have to kind of make sure to be very careful with this. We are Christians. However, I have a no religion rule on this channel, and so we are going to have to start taking action against people who come in with religious statements, whether it be Christian in nature, Islamic, Judaism, whatever it may be, even Hinduism, any kind of religious statement that's made, we're going to have to start treating that with the same severity as we do on political statements, because this is starting to get very out of hand over the past 2 days. That is also going to be extending into one particular instance where I've seen tonight, where there seems to be an endless amount of the smallest donations that can be made to the fundraiser, with the name kind of sending the same message that some of these accounts are sending in. Of course, we thank everyone for supporting the fundraiser and helping it out, but at this point, seeing that we've asked and requested for that to stop and it's continuing, I'm assuming that that is some sort of a light form of trolling and is trying to find a loophole or a way to skirt around our no politics, no religion rule. So I'm going to have to ask that that stops. You know, I thank you greatly so much for the support to this channel and to the fundraiser, but considering how that is starting to come off now, I'm going to have to ask that you stop for now. But I still thank you once again for the support that you've given to the fundraiser in the channel. But at this point, I think this has gone a little bit too far. Still, thank you so much once again, though. But without further ado, we are going to be moving on into this very interesting video by United24. And so here's the clip.
IS-19, almost 80 years old artillery is in action.
We got those sick trap beats.
The war in Ukraine has a different
Man, they
sides.
got that beat.
On the one hand, you have robots, drones, Navy Sea-flat, unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, super innovative technologies. But on the other hand, we have artillery here from the past century. This one was built in 1947, the time Stalin lived. Can you imagine?
This is an old anti-aircraft gun, a KS-19, firing a 100mm round with a maximum range of 21 kilometers. We are a creative and resourceful people. We turned this old lady into a supergun. We mounted it on an old decommissioned American Army man truck, bought in the Netherlands. It was in poor condition, but we fixed it up. Now, it easily carries this gun and bolsters increased mobility. With this gun and this man, we are highly mobile and can quickly change positions. Fire a shot, 1 or 2 minutes, and we're gone.
The KS-19 used to serve as a stationary anti-aircraft gun. Because these machines were archaic, they were not in use. In Ukraine, these machines were stored in Balaklia, Kharkiv region. But at the start of the full-scale invasion, the Russians captured the city. However, this weapon didn't interest them. The gun is 80 years old. After the deoccupation of the Kharkiv region, Viktor asked the higher command for permission to use the KS-19. He found funding and essentially set a precedent. An old anti-aircraft gun was transformed into a self-propelled artillery unit. Under his command, there are already 4 such units. But today, when we talk about artillery, we don't just mean big guns.
Сейчас понятия как такового артиллерии нету, оно сейчас более обширное.
The concept of artillery today doesn't exist as it used to. It's broader. It's called integrated fire support. For example, naval forces have ships, air forces have planes, and artillery is now a weapons complex, including drones and even reconnaissance.
Птичка, то есть БПЛА, плюс артиллерия и даже сюда и разведка включилась.
I'll describe the ideal scheme.
Конкретный экипаж.
A specific drone crew is tied to a specific battery. They are assigned a sector, and this sector is called a reconnaissance fire complex.
Dang, Hal Rose. Dang, $333. Good Lord.
Dang,
Hal
what'd that
Rose,
bring us up to, by the way?
almost 4,000. We are at 3,926. Dang, a huge
Big shout out.
Huge shout out to Hal Rose.
The drone flies, and upon finding a target, fire is immediately directed.
При обнаружении цели сразу наносит вогневое уражение.
We are in Donetsk region, not far from Pokrovsk, hotspot. General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine noticed that right now it's the most difficult area. We are here with drone unit 111 Territorial Defense Brigade. This unit working with reconnaissance drone RQ-35 from Danish company Skywatch. Main reason why we are here, we are trying to find artillery systems or maybe tanks or other armored machine near the front line.
Took his hat off, man.
Man, that was a really good launch. Like, if I'd have done that, it would have gone like straight to the ground.
Yeah, it would have for me, man, too. He was really smooth with that. He has a lot of experience.
On the battlefield. Gaining the ability to correct artillery fire and FPV drones in real time and see the result.
So, do you send all the information to the command post and they then transmit it to the artillery?
We work with the operational duty officers of certain units that we cooperate with, and all the communications with artillery crews, FPV drones, or with other wings happens through them.
The RQ-35 is a reconnaissance drone from Denmark. Its feature is the ability to stream everything it sees online, immediately transmitting the image to the pilot and then to the command post. This allows immediate correction of artillery or FPVs. The drone has a flight range of up to 30 kilometers, is easy to use, resistant to enemy electronic warfare, and durable. This unit has been using it for months.
Each unit is assigned a zone of responsibility. Accordingly, we monitor our area and, if necessary, inflict damage or correct the artillery of the senior commander. If our means are insufficient, the artillery of the senior commanders is involved. Recently, our artillerymen, our FPV pilots, have been working very well, hitting equipment on the approaches, which brings in manpower and armored vehicles that try to hit our positions. There is efficiency no matter what. We have a tactical level and a strategic level here. At the tactical level, we can monitor the forward positions where our servicemen are located at their strong points, and accordingly, we can respond to any enemy assault actions. Then there's the next level, of aircraft type or other types, where we can observe the enemy on the approach and inflict damage to prevent them from approaching and bringing in their groups. This is also quite effective, and we use it.
You know something that's pretty cool about what they do here? Is their little command centers right here with like the TVs and all the lighting and stuff like that. It looks like it's really easily like transportable. Like if they decided tomorrow they need to move it, it looks like it could be moved at like pretty much a moment's notice, which is pretty neat. Because I noticed they're using like a Dell laptop over there, and it's like normal monitors and screens. It's nothing like, you know, like all integrated like the US might have like in a big box or something like that. It's just it's cool how they use like normal stuff to like set up this room.
Yeah, it is really neat. And also, it is nice that it's portable, probably for them, because if their position ever possibly gets spotted or compromised, they can pack up and move immediately and not be subject to Russian artillery fire or precision strikes later on down the road, which is probably a massive benefit for them, a lot like the artillery.
The information comes together. On the screens, all feeds from all drones create a complete picture of what is happening on the front line. Due to the small caliber, only 100 millimeters, the gun has its limitations. Heavily armored vehicles with powerful frontal protection can withstand the hit.
We mainly work to suppress enemy manpower and columns. With this gun, you can't do much to a tank or something heavily armored from the front. But against equipment or manpower, it's effective.
I mean, they got that trap hit.
Right now, our target is enemy positions. The drone pilot spotted movement in one of the tree lines. Coordinates were given to the KS-19. The goal is to eliminate
Dude,
Russian
it's built
soldiers
on a
at the
freaking man. Did you see that? I just finally saw that. It's a man.
That's true, man. I didn't notice that earlier. But also, how'd that soldier get the name America, by the way? You saw that Ukrainian soldier had like a nickname of America?
Man, because he pisses red, white, and blue. Just like me.
He's either rich or he's like well equipped with like his equipment or something like that. It's like how else do you get the nickname America?
Or he was obese at one point.
He's a what?
Obese.
Damn, man, that's a violation.
I'm just kidding.
I thought you said at peace. I was like, I hope he's at peace. I hope.
Russian soldiers at their positions.
But that's the end of the clip. Really nice to see them operating a KS-19. A bit of an older piece, but still a usable piece. But moving on from that little clip in Avdiivka, and further on down the line and into the area around Novomikhailivka, we also got to see a Russian truck getting hit pretty freaking hard down here. And here's the clip. We can see the FPV drone flying on in. We can see our Russian truck right down here on the road. And that drone goes flying right into the back of him. Boom! Slam dead on the nail. Very nice to see. We can see another drone coming in. That's going to be finishing that job. And it's just getting a little bit lower. It's just making sure to line up just right. Just right. And we can see the drone flying on in. And boom, right into the dash. Setting it on fire and getting that thing crispy.
Boom, jaga jaga.
Boom, jaga jaga, blia. Boom, jaga jaga. And man, they really toasted that place. They crisped it, man. Like, that's extra well done. That's congratulations right there. Like, they added a new level to the cooking scale. It went from well done to surprise to congratulations. I mean, that is cooked. Moving on from that and out of that area and behind the lines, we also got to see a Ukrainian mine clearer. This little fella right here. Really interesting to see it, of course, be part of the Ukrainian sapper teams, and we also got to see it in action in this clip right here, which was also really cool. That's what it looks like when it's in action. It's a really clean vehicle.
Can you imagine how long it takes to actually do like all the areas that need to be mined? It's probably going to take forever.
Years, maybe even decades. Now you see the little flail up there. It actually has a small little mine flail. Also, YouTube's telling us that we're running into lag issues, but I don't think we are. But you see the little flail right up there, which is really cool. That's what's used to smack the mines and blow them up. And that's the end of that clip. Really cool to see that little mine clearing machine out there clearing mines, hopefully. But moving on from that and down into the area near Zaporizhia, we also got to see a Vampire anti-air system donated by the United States shooting down a Shahed 136 drone. And we can see the Shahed right there, and the Vampire is about to hit that thing and shoot it down. We can see that seizure-inducing flashing, and we can see the missile hit dead onto that Shahed and turn it into a small mushroom cloud. We can see it doing it again. Pretty impressive stuff.
That's so bright, it's like a nuke going off.
Yeah, dude, it's like a freaking Operation Trident or something like that. It's like, geez. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Really neat to see. And with that, we're now moving all the way up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 700, well, actually 879 of the war. Y'all can tell I've been doing this for a little too long because I'm getting mixed up on what hundreds of days it's been since the start. But here is the speech. Speech!
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні вже 10-ті роковини від того дня, коли російські окупанти знищили в українському небі пасажирський літак рейс MH17. Малазійський Боїнг, на борту якого було 298 людей, із них 80 діти. Громадяни різних країн, з різних частин світу: Нідерланди, Малайзія, Австралія, Сполучене Королівство, Індонезія, Німеччина, Канада, Бельгія, Філіппіни, Нова Зеландія. І за час, що минув, вдалося повністю встановити обставини цього злочину, як він став можливим, хто його забезпечував. І немає сумнівів, що судовий процес і загалом робота міжнародної юстиції обов'язково приведуть до абсолютно справедливих вироків щодо кожного, хто винен у цьому злочині. І це саме те, що потрібно. Скільки б зусиль не знадобилось, потрібна відповідальність усіх тих, хто приніс це зло. Бо самі вони є злом. І теж стосується тисяч інших російських злочинів цієї війни і самої цієї агресії. Після усього цього надійний мир може базуватись лише на задоволеному почутті справедливості у тих, хто постраждав від агресії. І всі в Україні, хто працює заради справедливості, всі в світі, хто допомагає нам, зокрема Нідерланди, які багато в чому є лідерами щодо питання про справедливість. Усім я вдячний, усім, хто ставить на місце російське зло і допомагає нам не залишити Москві відчуття безкарності. Світла та вічна пам'ять усім, чиї життя були забрані Росією. Сьогодні нашій команді, що займається пошуком українських полонених та обмінами, вдалося звільнити з російського полону ще 95 наших людей. Це воїни Збройних сил України, Національної гвардії, прикордонники. Більшість в сьогоднішньому обміні рядові і сержанти, 7 офіцери. Багато після важких поранень, 1 з хлопців із онкологічним захворюванням. Кожен отримає необхідну допомогу. І важливо, що серед цих хлопців є і той, хто вважався зниклим безвісті. І ми про кожного нашого воїна з'ясовуємо всі обставини. І це щастя, коли вдається знайти і тих, що до кого було найменше надії. Загалом нам вдалося повернути додому з російського полону вже 3405 людей. Ми маємо повернути усіх. Все для цього ми робимо. Я дякую кожному у світі, хто допомагає. Вдячний Об'єднаним Арабським Еміратам за допомогу у сьогоднішньому звільненні. І ще кілька речей. Ми працюємо над тим, щоб цей тиждень став дійсно результативним у відносинах з нашими партнерами. Я провів сьогодні нараду із зовнішньополітичною командою Офісу та МЗС. Потрібні сильні рішення партнерів, які дозволять поставити цю війну на курс до її справедливого завершення. І я дякую кожному, хто демонструє відповідне лідерство, чесне лідерство. І сьогодні ж я підписав указ, який вводить в дію рішення РНБО щодо нової стратегії морської безпеки України. Цей документ враховує безпекові зміни та новації, які ми забезпечили, зокрема, в Чорному морі, в розвитку наших сил. Це сучасна стратегія, і реалізуємо її разом з нашими партнерами. Найближчим часом я збираюсь обговорити з ними деталі цієї стратегії. З тими, хто, так само як і ми, бажає стабільної безпеки для своїх регіонів та усього світу. Я дякую кожному, хто допомагає, дякую всім працівникам наших державних інституцій, нашим воїнам, нашим спеціальним службам та усім представникам громадянського суспільства України, хто був залучений до підготовки стратегії. Слава нашим людям, слава Україні!
And
Herom Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 879 of Dware. And it's time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And I gotta say that it has been one hell of a night. YouTube is telling us, Matthew, they want us to believe that only 6.2 thousand people were here tonight. But
I'm calling cap, man, because I'm seeing 53,000 total views already at this point in the stream. That indicates that over, I think, 8,000 people have been here at any point tonight. So I think that number might be off.
8.5, most likely. That would probably be close to the actual number. So a lot of y'all were here tonight. YouTube isn't telling us about most of y'all being here, but we still know y'all are here because y'all are showing up as views. But I got to thank all of y'all so much for being here, whether we know y'all are here or not, because apparently a lot of their YouTube is classifying thousands of y'all as lurkers right now and not even letting us physically see y'all. And also someone misunderstood what I was saying earlier. They said, well, a lot of views come in after the stream, that's why you don't see them. You would think, but what you're talking about there is overall viewers. What I'm talking about right now is live viewers. Like, I'll show you, for example. This is my control room. This is what we see every night when we're on air, and you can see right there. Once again, I want to show this because some people say out there, some crazy person out there who's on crack says that we make money on fundraiser nights. You can see right there, YouTube has not recognized a single cent came in as chat revenue tonight on the fundraiser. But nevertheless, this is what we see when the stream is running live on my second monitor. And right now, they show that the peak is 6.2 thousand live viewers. Now, a lot of people are going to go, okay, well, that's just how many people were here. Like, what are you talking about? You sound like a schizophrenic saying that there are thousands more here and we just don't know about them. That's what you would think until I tell you that last night, YouTube said that we had a peak viewership of, what was it? It was 5.5 thousand live viewers, but then they updated 2 hours before we went live tonight on yesterday's numbers, and now they're saying that the peak viewership was actually up around 7.7, 7.8. Somewhere around there. And it's giving us a very clear idea that YouTube, for some reason, is having a very hard time calculating the figures and the numbers of live viewers that are on stream, and they're always computing it correctly about a day or two after the streams go live. I don't know why they're doing that, and I don't mean to make that a big problem every single night and bring that up to y'all, but it's annoying me a lot now because I like to know how many people are actually here, because I like to know how many people I'm really talking to, and to get an idea. It feels a little bit more personable if I actually know that there was about 8.5 thousand people here, instead of trying to make guesswork in my head about how many people really are here. So that's something that's been annoying me a good bit, because we know, based off of the overall viewership, way more people are here than YouTube's telling us about right now. And whether we can see y'all or not, I want to make it very clear, we are so happy to have y'all here, and we thank you so much. It's just that it annoys me that YouTube isn't telling me that y'all are here until like tomorrow or the next day. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. But what a wild night it has been, Matthew. It has been a night of tumult in the live chat. The full moon has really brought it out. But we get to talk to each and every one of y'all, and this is the fun segment of the stream. And tonight it was a little bit of a rougher night, but I was very happy to see the Lee Spring Army prevailed, as it always does, making sure to overcome all of the weirdness that happens out there in the world. People trying to come in and disrupt how the Lee Spring Army runs. I know that the Lee Spring Army knows better than that, and it'll keep running the way it has been for 879 days now. But Matthew, I understand that we have a riveting question that we've asked everyone, and I want you to guide us through it. What was the question? What were people saying about it, and what were you thinking about it as well?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we have one more poll to address. And this one says, right now, what does the West need to do to ensure peace and stability in the world? It looks like 63% said a strong posture for deterrence, while 22% said we need offensive actions to restore order, and 11% said diplomacy and peacekeeping actions. And on this one, I will say this. Unfortunately, we did not deter the invasion of Ukraine. The deterrence sort of failed on that front, and Russia felt emboldened to invade Ukraine for whatever reason. So we can't really look back or go back in time to fix that. It's done right now, so we have to deal with it. So, me personally, I believe a strong posture for deterrence in the future should prevent Russia from going any further, and hopefully Ukraine will ward off the Russians with enough aid from the West and push them out completely. So, I'm with the 63%. I think all we can do at this point is to deter, and we can't go back and fix the things of the past. Let's leave it at that. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that this actually, Matthew, you threw that out perfectly. It was like the scales of escalation that we have. The first step in a good situation during peacetime is diplomacy and peacekeeping actions. The next step we would take is strong postures for deterrence, and then the third would be offensive actions to restore order. I believe we've already gone through the diplomacy and peacekeeping action and strong posture of deterrence steps, and we now only have the third step to move to, which is offensive actions to restore order. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but the fact of the matter is that if you mess up each phase before that, you can't go back and revisit them again. You can only go forward to the next one. And I believe at this point, like in the Middle East, we need strong offensive actions to restore order in this region. I would say that I would say that a strong posture of deterrence is still what we need to do inside of East Asia, because that still seems to be working right now. If it stops working, then we'll move on to step 3, which is offensive actions. And then in Eastern Europe, the strong posture for deterrence has not really boded us all too well. So I think that we need to be in the phase of moving towards an offensive action to restore order in this area, or at least to make the Russians believe that we are committed to an offensive action to restore order, so that way they get scared and then they move to the diplomatic negotiating table on our terms instead of their terms. I would believe that's how I would take an approach in each of the 3 areas. Each one's a little bit different, and we have to have a slightly different approach. We can't take a one-stop approach for every situation, because it's not going to be tailored to deal with the needs or the problem in hand. So I would say that a deterrence, a strong posture in Eastern Europe is good, but I think we're moving more towards offensive actions here. Offensive actions are needed in the Middle East right now, without a doubt. And then a posture of deterrence is needed in East Asia still, but we do need to be ready to move on to strong offensive actions in that area as well, if possible, or if needed.
I think generally though, like, you really can't go wrong approaching foreign policy from a position of peace through strength. You really can't go wrong with that policy right there. If you want to call it carry a big stick, you can call it that as well. But either way you go, being weak or being hopeful that diplomacy will always come through is not a good way to approach it. There are some places where that will work, kind of like the Enforcer was saying, but there's also some places, like for example with Russia, when a madman's in charge, they're not going to listen to reason, and all they understand is a force and strength, and also basically brutality, to be honest. So, right now we need to really focus on having a strong posture to make sure that these adversaries don't feel emboldened to go back into other places as well. Sadly, though, like I said, we can't reverse Ukraine, but we can prevent other things from happening that could be worse than that. But Enforcer, what say you about that?
I would have to agree with that. I think that you're largely correct. We do have to move towards having a strong posture of deterrence in every situation, because that also allows us to do diplomacy and peacekeeping actions a lot easier, because people are less apt to try and mess with the United States. But once again, while I'm saying that, I'm not really seeing that changing anytime soon. A strong posture of deterrence, in my opinion, very rarely happens for the modern day United States. For the Western world, like France, it looks as though they're trying to move down that route on their own. But for the United States, it just seems that no one, and I mean no one, there's no exception there, is not really committed to the idea of strong deterrence. They're either into really all of them are into different forms of pretty much just giving things away without even really posing a strong deterrence or even wanting to make a fight over that thing. People just treat everything like it can be given away, and I'm not really a big fan of that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so that was our last poll to address. So we're now going to address one last top donor of the night, and it's a $50 donation from Purple Gerbil, a channel legend. And thank you very much, Purple Gerbil, for that massive donation. That brings us up to $4,047 of the $3,000 goal raised. So tremendous to see, and I'm glad to see we had another successful Ukraine fundraiser on a Sunday night. Huge shout out to the LSA for that. And now it's time to jump into your questions as well and see what you'll have to say. But first of all, we have to get the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Rumpelstiltskin, and David Millsaps. They said the Morse code decipher says U.S. bombers flew just miles away from St. Petersburg for the first time. Checkmate. And LSA.
And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I have to congratulate y'all for getting that right on the 879th day of the war. That is absolutely impressive to know that y'all keep on getting it right time and time again, and that was dead on the nail, the absolute correct Morse code message. And so I hope that that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are now moving on into the live chat questions proper, as we have finally gotten to $4,052 raised on the fundraiser. Absolutely amazing. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so I've been seeing a lot of people tonight throughout all the tumult. Actually, not all the tumult. It's only two people, but all the stuff that's happened tonight and all the news and everything else. I've seen a lot of people asking for the marmot, and it's about time after that success on the fundraiser. Let's bring him out. We want Alan. Bring him out.
Oh, hello there. I won't be able to do it too much because my vocal cords are getting really strained at this point, but oh, hello there. Hey! It's the marmot.
Hello there, Governor. Welcome back, good sir. We've been having a great night with the fundraiser, good sir. And the Fry, he's been standing by watching like usual, wondering, oh man, how come the marmot with his fat ass, how come he can always pull off these fundraisers so well, but I can only pull in like a handful of people? Oh man, give me answers.
Oh man, there goes another 100 subscribers. Oh man. That's it, dude. Pitiful. But
man, when you think things are going bad, just remember it can always be worse. You could be hot dog, man. Don't do drugs, kids.
Don't. That's a good life lesson right there. Also, when is that lazy bastard gonna put out that hit piece? I've been waiting for a week and a half now. What's so stupid about this crackhead guy is that I'm saying this, and that's why he's not putting it out, is that I keep on saying, when's the lazy bastard going to put it out? So in his cracked out mind, he goes, oh man, because he wants it, I'm not going to put it out. And then as soon as I stop mentioning it on stream, he's going to put it out. Like, I will put money on it. That's how that clown's going to work. Like, don't you think, Matthew? I think that's exactly how it's going to go.
Man, I'll be honest with you. When you said what you said, you were talking about when's the next hit piece coming out. I was thinking, as goofy as this guy is, that reverse psychology will work on him. And sure enough, it did work because he was promising a hit piece like almost a week or 2 weeks ago, and there's been no sign of it. And he's over there like quietly seething because he occasionally makes a comment about us and makes a slight jab at us. He's over there trying to hold back the urge to make a hit piece because you keep saying over and over, where is it? Where is it? He's like, I'm not making it just out of spite. It's like, is he too dumb to realize that you're literally like using reverse psychology on him?
No, I'm not using reverse psychology. I really want the dumb bastard to make the damn video. It's
you actually want the hit piece.
I actually want the hit piece. Like,
you're built different.
Yeah, like I'm built different at this point. I want that thing out there. I want to see it because I'm sure it's going to be the same canned shit that we've heard for 2 years now. And it's going to be, oh man, they steal the money out of the fundraisers, grifter. And while he takes like paid vacations into a war zone on his viewers' dime and acts like they owe it to him because they fundraised for Ukraine on their own, but they owe it to him that they were able to fundraise on their own, and so that you have to pay him thousands of dollars. Really, the equal amount they put into the fundraiser, they have to give him so that way he can get a free vacation. Like, like that kind of stuff. Or better yet, that legal fund that disappeared, like after the fundraising happened for it, and then the legal fund never came to fruition because no attorney ever reached out to us, so we know that it never came to fruition. Or anything else for that matter. I remember, Matthew. I remember when we looked at something that was very interesting. Man, don't you remember the airline tickets conversation? Because someone wanted us to go to Ukraine. We were like, how much does it cost to fly to Poland? And then we found out it was like a $2,000 like round way trip to Poland on a plane.
I vaguely remember something like that. I honestly don't remember most of it.
Yeah, and so I was like, wow, that's really expensive. I mean, if you're an American Ukraine war YouTuber or something that actually goes to Ukraine, like $2,000 is just sunk on an airline ticket alone. You know, just get over there in third class, like all kinds of interesting stuff like that. It's interesting, but I just want a hit piece. Like, I really do. Like, I'm not doing reverse psychology here. I really want it. And I think that it shows the cowardice of that guy that he's not putting one out. And the fact of the matter is that nowadays, if he puts one out, he loses about another 150 to 200 subscribers each time. And then we get about 50 of his subscribers because they're tired of him. I want it. Like, put it out. I'm sick of waiting. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that as well. But still, we got Alan the Marmot. We love Alan the Marmot. Alan the Marmot is the best, the greatest. And it's wonderful to see Alan the Marmot here on screen. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so real quick, I did not get to run this poll question because sadly we didn't have enough time to get into it and also run it for, enough time to actually make it worthwhile. So I'll just ask the question myself to the audience. We've been seeing in Europe several countries, actually a couple of them, actually institute conscription again for the first time in decades. We've also seen other countries in Europe talking about putting conscription into place due to the aggressions from Russia towards Ukraine and also the possibility of it spilling over into NATO. So the question to the audience is this: since the European countries are starting to think about this again, is there a real possibility of the United States, perhaps in the background, sort of coming up with potential conscription or draft ideas as well to get young men trained into the military to be ready to go in case Russia does attack NATO? That's a big question. And honestly, in my opinion, I would say that's probably not on the table. But I saw a lot of people on Twitter and other places today saying that might be a real possibility. I'm kind of doubtful about that, but I was curious to see what your thoughts are, Enforcer, and also the audience as well.
I don't think we would do that. Selective service, or the implementation of the Selective Service Act, would be very unpopular on both ends. As far as the political willpower would go, speaking about that neutrally, I don't think there's any follow through on both ends there to want to bring that about and be that person, be that president, regardless of who it was, that brought back the selective service and started forcing citizens into the military. That would seem very un-American. It wouldn't bode well for them. And so I don't really think there would be a lot of follow through for that here in America. I also would have to say, at least in Europe, at least with people on Twitter, I wouldn't really believe people on Twitter when they say stuff like that, because Twitter does say some of the darndest things. They said that China was going to invade Taiwan in early June, and that never even came close to happening. Twitter says all kinds of weird things, and then everyone just kind of hops on a bandwagon and runs with it. I would say that's certainly not coming around back in the United States, unless if it was a major world war, and we would only do it once it began, because we didn't start the draft before World War II. We started the draft after World War II began, in, I think, very late 1941. Well, it would have had to have been very late 1941 or early 1942. And something that's really interesting, Matthew, is that since the dawn of time, pretty much, the U.S. Army has allowed people, when they enlist into the Army, to pick their job. They're the only branch that does that. But something that's very interesting is that in World War II, everyone who went and volunteered and enlisted after Pearl Harbor in the Army, all of them were picking non-combat roles. Only I think it was 6 or 5% of the people that were volunteering were getting into the infantry and other combat positions. So then the Army asked Congress to shut off the volunteers to the Army, so that way the Army would get into the draft pool, because if you're drafted, you don't get to pick your job. But if you enlist into the Army, you get to pick your job. So then the Army became draft only at that point, so that way the Army could make sure to fill in the combat roles.
That's very interesting. I did not know that at all. But also, one more thing I was just thinking about, also to sort of back up the idea that I really don't think a draft is probably going to be happening anytime soon in the United States. You have to remember that in Europe, for example, Latvia is one of the countries that has instituted a new form of conscription requiring young men to get trained in the military at a certain age. I think also Norway has either implemented something like that or they're thinking about it. But we have to remember, though, these countries are much smaller than the United States. They're also, their population is much smaller as well. And even smaller than that is the pool of young men that can actually fight in the war. So those countries are thinking, if we get attacked tomorrow, and we need to have enough people right now already trained and ready to go, because going up against Russia, even with Russia's, really lack of skill or really equipment or manpower, that would be a challenge for a smaller country like Latvia until NATO could step in and help them. So that is a consideration on that front as well. But the United States being detached in its own little isolated bubble over here, and also with a huge population and a much larger military, we don't have to worry about that as soon as these other countries probably do.
Yeah, that is something true. And I would have to agree with that. I think that's why a lot of countries are doing stuff like that over there. And on top of that, considering that they're such smaller countries, it almost becomes a matter of the people's defense of the country. You pretty much have to start whipping out the armed citizenry at that point to try and hold down some ground, or maybe even start conducting partisan operations if the area was overtaken. So it makes a lot of sense for them. Not really that much sense for America, at least as a preemptive measure. If a major conflict was to begin, then it would, of course, make sense. It's kind of a necessity at that point. But until then, I would not say that it would happen. But I hope that that does address that fairly well. And also, I saw a lot of people bring up the ASVAB in the chat after I say you could pick your job in the Army. A lot of people were like, yes, depending on test scores. That is true. I didn't bring that in, but what is it? What is the name of the ASVAB, Matthew, when you actually break it down? It's like the Army Standard Vocational Aptitude Battery or something like that. But it's the test that's given by the Department of Defense to anyone wanting to join the military, and it is a grading scale. The minimum that you can make to join, I think, is a 31 or a 35. I think the lowest is the Marine Corps at 35, and then every branch has a higher requirement for your minimum ASVAB. I think the Air Force is the highest. Well, no, actually nowadays it's the Space Force, but up until then, I think the Air Force was the highest. What was it, Matthew, like a 55 or a 65 on the ASVAB?
For the Air Force?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was around, I think it was like 60 or something like that.
I think it was a 65. And then and then there's this magic branch called the Space Force, where if you score really, really high on your ASVAB, like if you're in the 80s or the 90s, they approach you instead of the Air Force. Like, this is actually how it goes, according to everyone I know in the Space Force. The Air Force recruiter will look at your ASVAB, and they'll be like, oh my God, I'll be back. And then they just leave the room, and a Space Force recruiter comes in, they go, it's like the Air Force, but cooler. Like, everyone has said, Matthew, that has joined the Space Force that I talked to, that the recruiters literally gave the exact same spiel. It was literally just, it's the Air Force, but it's cooler. And that was literally just the whole recruitment spiel.
That's because in reality, the Space Force recruiters really didn't know even what the Space Force really is at the moment. So that was literally all they knew to say was, oh, it's cool. It's like they weren't even doing that to like fool you into it. Like some like recruiters will be like, oh, look, it's all like peaches and roses and you get a free Camaro if you join the Army or like the Navy or something like that. Like they'll just straight up lie to you and fool you to get in there. Like the Space Force wasn't even trying to fool you. They were just like, we don't even know what the hell's going on, but you want to join?
Yeah, they're like, it's cool. I mean, we're space related, isn't that neat? But let's see, the ASVAB scores that Matthew and me got, I think Matthew took an ASVAB not too long ago. I think his high score was like, what was it, Matthew? Like a 90 something?
No, it's actually an 88.
Yeah, an 88. It was incredibly high because the highest score you can make on the ASVAB is a 99. Because it's a percentile thing. So if you make a 99, you're in pretty much the top 1 percentile, meaning that you're smarter than pretty much everyone else who's taking the ASVAB. And then it goes down from there. So if you make like a 35, say, that means that you're only smarter than about 35% of everyone who took the ASVAB, meaning that about 2/3 of everyone else scored better than you on that ASVAB. But beyond that, I think I made it my highest score. I only took it once. It was like an 82 or an 84. I forgot which one it was, but it was a pretty okay score. And then, there's loads of people who make lower scores than that. But the higher the score you make, the more jobs are available to you, especially with the Army. And also the more jobs are available to you in other branches, but you don't get to pick your job in those branches. It's just given to you. But the Army is really interesting in that you can pick the job. So if you get like a 99 on the ASVAB and you want to go into the Army, you literally can pick any job in the Army you want, pretty much. I believe I believe if I'm correct, Matthew, in some instances, they even allow you to train and go in as a warrant officer. I'm not really sure on that. Correct me if I'm wrong in the live chat. But if you make a really, really high score, they'll be like, hell, go to helicopter training and you can become a warrant officer or something like that. But I'm not
Maybe
really...
so. And also, I see some people in here talking about, man, I think I got an 89 on my ASVAB and I was stoned. I'm not going to lie. I remember those. When I took the ASVAB, I actually took it twice. I think the first time I made an 80. I think the first time was actually like an 86 or 85 or something like that. The second time was an 88. But I really just, I don't recall all the parts of it. I remember there were some mechanics parts and things like that that was kind of interesting to see. But the math part I was very worried about. But then I actually took the ASVAB and they made the math super simple. Like I was like, I'm terrible at math, but I actually did pretty good on the math part on the ASVAB. So it's not like it's, you know, the ACT or something like that or the SAT.
Oh, no. Yeah.
But it's a little bit, maybe 2 rungs below that. So it's not insanely difficult. But I guess, you know, if you're not trying, it could be very hard. But also, there are some things on that can be tricky. But it wasn't that bad in my opinion.
One thing though, man, I remember this question because I got it wrong. And I remember I was like, that is such a stupid question. It was like, what is the name of someone who is big into horses? And the answer is equestrian. I didn't know the word at that time. Literally, the only reason I know what equestrian means is that after the test, I went and Googled, like, what the hell was the answer to that question? And it's equestrian, apparently. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, what is the point of that question on the ASVAB? Like, oh, sir, we're taking fire from some equestrians. It's like, what the hell is the point of that question? Like, who needs to know what an equestrian is? Ever. Like,
Man,
I don't...
It's like, man, go over there and get those equestrians. They're like, yes, sir. They over there like light up all the rabbits in the field or something.
No, light up all the people riding on horseback. Like, you don't even know what an equestrian is. I hardly even know what it is still. Like, apparently it's just someone who's into horses. But it's like, why just say they're into horses? Like, why do you have to call them an equestrian? How does that make any sense? I don't know. I don't know. But I've started to pick up on the whole equestrian thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address at least my limited knowledge about the ASVAB, because I did take the ASVAB. Like, everyone in our school took the ASVAB. It was, like, in the middle of nowhere in Alabama, so a lot of people's only hope of getting out of the middle of nowhere in Alabama was to get in the military, so everyone was taking the ASVAB. But we scored
I'm not going to lie, though. It is a good way to get out. Like, you're just trying to, like, get out of an area or something like that, and you're, like, really not wanting to go to college. Like, I'm not going to dog on it that bad. The military is a good way to get out of there, and also it does instill discipline, things like that. It's obviously not perfect. I'm not going to lie on that. It's not perfect. There are some bad parts to it from what I've heard, but it's a good way for you know, some people to get out of places if you don't want to be somewhere and you don't have any other way out. It's not that bad.
Oh, dude, but then the recruiters... Oh, I came from a one-stop, one red light town. We had one Walmart, and there was absolutely no hope of having a good life in that town. I joined the military, and I saw the world, and I came back, and I get paid on the 1st and the 15th of every month. You ought to come join the military, my son. It'd be fun. And then people join the military, and then they do that little basic thing, you know, like in between your junior and senior year, and then they come back and they're like the biggest weapon against the recruiters, man, because you're like, how did it go? And they're like, it sucked, dude, don't join. And then you're like, oh, and then the recruiters, huh?
You know the recruiter that lied to me the most, and also for whatever reason kept hounding me over and over and over. It was actually a National Guard recruiter.
Oh,
and I think you know who he was.
I know.
You recognize the guy.
Was he the guy who would go, "Hey, we have a cannon," and he always started off his goofy?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
That guy told the most stories or, you know, falsehoods I've ever heard. And I would always just listen and sort of like respond like I didn't really know the truth. Like, is that right? And he would like be saying the most like obscene, like absurd stuff. Like, yeah, man, you get to go on the free vacations here, over there. It's got all the great food and all the great air conditioning. He was like hamming it up, talking about how you get a free Camaro and stuff like that. Like they always like to say, like stuff. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I knew it was all fake when they said it. Yeah, also the sign-on bonus that you'll probably never see for like the entire time you're enlisted until you finally like get near the end of it or something. But it's just, you know, the recruiters tell stories all over the place. I think it was Rob in the live chat. He said, recruiters never lie, being sarcastic. I'm like, oh man, like I've dealt with recruiters before, and there are a couple honest ones here and there, but they're typically the Air Force recruiters. The honest ones are those, because they're not looking for too many recruits, because they're already meeting their quotas pretty much. It's the Marines, the Army, and the National Guard that's really like line up a storm to get you in there, from what I've seen.
Dude, the Marine guy though, I think our Marine recruiter was a detriment to the recruiting in the Marines, because he would come in and he had like this. He had like this aura about him. It wasn't like a good aura or a bad aura. It was just one that you got off of him, where you're like, I don't really think I'd want to be around this guy in the Marines. Because he would come in, he'd be like, I just want to be back in my unit. You know, the shrapnel blast of an M777 howitzer spans from one touchdown zone to the other. Destruction, death to everyone. And you're like, you know, I think this guy liked it. I guess, like, I don't know what's up with this guy, but he's a little weird. And then the Army recruiter would, oh no, dude, we have multiple Army recruiters, and each one was a trip. There was this, remember that one Army recruiter, Matthew, that would use her assets, and she used it on that one guy, and he ended up signing that freaking 8-year contract. It's like, what in the, like, it was bizarre.
It's effective. It's effective. The recruiting tool worked very well. I saw it worked very well on several people. But it was crazy though, because the recruiters would like hover, like swarm around the JRTC room in our high school. And that's normal, because the JRTC people are already sort of inclined to be sort of favorable to the military. So they know that's a good pool to like try to recruit from. But there would literally be every single day, no lie, every single day, at least 1 or 2 recruiters always hanging around the room, just talking to everybody they could all the time, except for the Air Force recruiter. They were hardly ever around, but everybody else was always around.
Man, dude, oh man, thinking back about those recruiters, man, the stuff they'd say to try and get you to sign up, it was crazy. I mean, because if you know, like, if you have anyone in your family who has served, or you know anyone who's served, they'll tell you that all the things the recruiters are saying are lies, and then you know what they're saying is lies, and most of it, like 85% of most of the things most recruiters would say would just be flat out lies about what would happen after you joined. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Joseph Landham said, growing up on a military base, you probably won't want to join. You know, and that's something else as well. Like, a lot of people don't like it when they're in, but they kind of like that they did it. So then it's kind of like a half and half thing. Me personally, I don't think military service is bad. Like, obviously not. It's not bad. It's a great honor and service to the country and everything, but it's not like, it's not going to be cushy and great either. I mean, it's the army, or it's really the military as a whole. Their job is to fight in a war and kill people. That's never going to be that cushy or glamorous. It's just kind of a fact of life. But it's still an important service to do to the country. So, you know, you kind of have like the back and forth. You have a double-edged sword there. You have some pros and cons. Because, you know, to say that it's all glorious and fun and great would be a lie. And then also to say that it sucks and it's terrible, it's just not even worth joining, that'd also be a lie too. It's kind of a little bit down the middle in my opinion, although I've never really, of course I've never served. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. With that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next question here is going to go to Boss, who says, as a historian, would you consider Putin's war of self-aggrandizement, that's above my pay grade on that one. Let me start over. He said, as a historian, would you consider Putin's war of self-aggrandizement
Aggrandizement.
Oh, I don't know, man. I'm going to wing it this time. He said, as a historian, would you consider Putin's war of unprovoked aggression to be the greatest military blunder of the 21st century so far? And if NATO fails, that's an even greater blunder.
I would say yes. I would say that probably would be one of the greatest blunders of the century. But the century is young. We still have 3/4 of it left. And there could be many other big blunders to come. But so far, this has been the biggest one. Well, I don't know. Because, I mean, the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 to get rid of weapons of mass destruction, and that war in itself was kind of what led the, let's see, what was it called? The Fedayeen to start really spurning the terrorist groups in Iraq, and then the Iranians took a bit of the control of the chaos that then led to the Arab Spring in the early 2010s, that then led to all the extremist groups that we know of today really growing in strength and size and creating a massive problem. That may be one of the other, I would say that's probably the second biggest blunder of the 21st century so far. The biggest one, though, is certainly the Ukraine war, in my opinion, but there's still a lot to go. But in my opinion, I would say yes, this is probably one of those once in a century kind of a thing where you look back and you go, wow, that was actually a really bad move, and it was poorly thought out. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, a lot of people were like, dang, you kind of said something a little scathing about America. And I got to say this, because just because you like something doesn't mean that you always have to be, you know, blinded by your love or your patriotism for something and say that America's never done anything wrong. I mean, we have done something wrong. I generally say that the invasion of Iraq in 2003, with hindsight, wasn't a good idea. It of course was something that at the time, based off of the information that we had, it was a necessity. It was something we had to do. But now knowing that there was no weapons of mass destruction, they weren't even close to making one, it was really pointless. But the fact still stands, it ended up creating a lot of issues. And while America is an amazing country and it does great things, and it's a very successful country, I would say that's one of the larger misfortunes that the country had. Of course, it doesn't make me hate America, and it doesn't cast a dark shadow over America's entire legacy, but it is a little bit of an unfortunate whoopsie-daisy that we kind of pulled off in the Middle East during that time, at least in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here, this one is going to Eric Kress. He says, Matt and Enforcer, do you think that Israel and the U.S. will stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon?
I don't know, because right now it seems like there's so much indecision with that, and we're not really seeing anything even heading towards that direction, that I don't think so. And that's kind of the concerning thing about it, is that I just don't really see enough moving in the direction of trying to stop them to believe that it will happen. Oh, like where they will be stopped. I think they may actually end up getting a usable nuclear weapon at this point, which is very concerning. But with that, I hope that does.
And also the time frame to actually stop Iran from actually finishing their development. That time frame is actually already passing as we speak, because it was announced, I think, 2 or 3 days ago that Iran is developing the nuke, and they're about a week or two away from finalizing the actual development itself. So if the U.S. was going to do something, right now is literally the time as we're speaking that they should be doing something to stop it. So it doesn't look like they really have a plan together to do that, unless they're going to suddenly spring something on Iran at the last minute, which I don't think is going to really happen. It looks like they might let Iran get the nuke and then try to deal with it afterward, which is definitely, in my opinion, not the best way to handle that whatsoever. Kind of what we did with Ukraine. We let Russia invade, and then afterward we try to deal with it. It's better to try to prevent things and try to go back and reverse them. It's almost impossible to reverse something once it's been happened. So, you know, to me, they should do something, but it doesn't look like they will.
Yeah, that's usually how the United States is working these days. And you know, and then there's some pros and cons with being a proactive instead of a reactive country. But to be honest, I would rather be proactive and end up running into the consequences of being proactive in our decision making, kind of like with the invasion of Iraq in 2003, than being reactive and then allowing someone to get a nuclear weapon or something along those lines, and then we have to deal with that world where we really are stuck and can't do anything. That would be the kind of world that I would be fine with. So while I'll say this. While I say that the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was a major mistake, at least as far as destabilizing the region and all of that, I would still have rather invaded Iraq in 2003 than sat there and heard that they were possibly making a nuclear weapon and then sat back and let them make one, at least according to the intelligence we had at the time. Because when we're talking about this right now, Matthew, with Iran, we have to remember this is the exact same thing that we were saying here in America before we invaded Iraq in 2003. And this is the exact reason publicly that we did invade Iraq in 2003. And we were having to go through the exact same decision making right now. And we're coming to the same conclusion that we came to in 2003, that a proactive action against Iran would be better than a reactive action after they have a weapon of mass destruction. So while you know, and so I have to go back to the whole thing of me saying that was a mistake. While it was a mistake in hindsight, I certainly see the decision making that was made during that time and completely understand why that action was made. Is because they were dealing with a very dangerous sounding situation like we are right now, and they decided that it would be better to try and nip it in the bud and maybe be wrong in the future than let it progress forward. And so
And also, it could be right now that the U.S. is very hesitant to actually, deal with this proactively, like we did back in the day when we were told that weapons of mass destruction existed in the Middle East, and then we went and invaded. They could be frozen with fear right now, thinking that if we go in there and we repeat the same thing again that happened way back in the day, then we're going to look like real fools if we don't have like concrete evidence that it's going to happen. So I wonder if the statements here from the Secretary of State are actually true, or is it simply a strong belief that there is a nuke being developed by Iran and they'll have it in 1 to 2 weeks? Because if it's true, it seems like you would definitely want to go in there and stop that, but yet we're not seeing that. So I'm wondering if they really have the concrete evidence required to actually, pull the trigger on an invasion or an attack on Iran.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it, and that may be the reason why decision making is paralyzed. And we also have to remember that a lot of people are still looking at the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was very sour in most of the public's opinion, and maybe that might be swaying some decision making as well, as that they might not want to repeat something that may end up being a disaster right off of the cusp of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which at the end part was pretty rough. We can't really deny that. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. With that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this question goes to Andy L. He says, will Russia pay war damages to Ukraine in cash or card?
Probably card. Probably
card. That comes with a 2.5% convenience fee.
Yes. That will be going to the Bank of America. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. We are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this question goes to Ricky Chaos, who says, have you heard any updates on Xi's health since the stroke rumors? Because I've heard those rumors circulating around that he had a stroke during the third plenum session.
I think it was entirely untrue at this moment. And also, if he had a stroke during a plenum, that would be pretty bizarre. I mean, that would actually be pretty wild. And he wouldn't really be able to hide that well, because senior party officials would be clamoring to get control of the country right now, because they would have seen him start going into having a stroke and then have a stroke. So I believe that the information is untrue at the moment. We don't have enough verification or proof to confirm that he did have a stroke. We just have rumors, and rumors are just that. We can't really work off of the rumors too much, because there's really nothing there to corroborate anything rather than just a statement and a trust me bro. And we always make sure to not work on trust me bros. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, if y'all are wondering what a plenum is, a plenum is, well, there's the People's Congresses, and much like the United States, I think the United States right now is on its 119th Congress at the moment. China has People's Congresses, and People's Congresses happen over the course of 5 or 6 years, I believe. And during those years, they have these things called plenums, which is where they have these annual meetings, and each annual meeting has a specific theme. And when I mean theme, it doesn't mean like, like this year is the sickle and the next year is the hammer or something like that. I mean, one year will be focusing entirely on population growth concerns. The next year we'll be focusing on agriculture. The next one after that on industry. The next one on that on grand strategic ambitions, and such things like that. So each plenum has a specific focus. Sadly, we never really get to know which plenums have what focus, because usually the plenums are kept fairly secret, and then they're usually mentioned in the 5th plenum of each People's Congress. And so we don't really know exactly what they've been talking about for years until about the 5th year. But still, going off of what we know, I would find it very hard to believe that he had a stroke during a plenum, and no party officials are trying to climb their way up to the position of chairman of the Security Council, or chairman of the Security Committee is what it's actually called in China, or that of the president of China, which Xi Jinping actually pretty much habitates both of those seats, because the president of China is also the chairman of the Security Committee, and that's why Mao is called Chairman Mao, is because he was the chairman of the Security Committee. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and gives a little bit of information about how the Chinese the Chinese Communist People's Congress works, because that's what it's called. It's called the CPC. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Christian Cruz. He says, as a response to Russia's aggression to the B-52, should we do an elephant walk next week on the 28th of July when the Russian Navy has a parade in St. Petersburg?
An elephant walk. I'm sorry, I'm actually a little bit ignorant on that terminology. So let me go pull it up. Elephant walk. What does it mean to do the elephant walk? In modern times, elephant walk came to mean a maximum sortie generation in strategic air command. Elephant walks also became a part of Inspector General exercises, and sometimes were only a taxi exercise without actual departures and landings. I would say yes. As far as I'm understanding, that's pretty much just sending as many bombers as we can up in a formation to pretty much just send a message, or at least get an Inspector General's review on the ground. I would say yes. I think that would be a good move, because it would be a show of force, and once again, trying to put the Russians into a mindset to where they know that if they went to war, it would end up not going in their favor. And we really need to get that as a prevailing mindset, not in the Russian public. It doesn't matter what the Russian public thinks. It really matters what the central government of the Federation believes. And if we can get them in that mindset, just off of these kinds of actions, they will start to cower down in their mindset, or they might become a little bit more violent and unpredictable. But we'll have to take that risk if we need to. But I would say yes. I think that would be a fairly good move to make. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you for introducing me to a new bit of terminology there that I'd never heard of before. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. And I gotta say, what a stream it was. In the wildly short 2.5 hours that this stream has run, 60,000 people have watched this stream. So I'm assuming that we probably reached a peak of about 9,000 people tonight, if the number updates tomorrow. So it was an incredibly massive group of people who were here tonight. And I gotta thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. If y'all enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. We run the stream every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every single night, covering major news from not just Ukraine, but from around the world whenever it happens. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. I thank you all greatly for raising $4,072 on tonight's fundraiser for Nova Ukraine. And I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, good night, folks, and thank you all for another great fundraiser tonight. Absolutely tremendous. Another whopping fundraiser, which is way above the goal, and we greatly appreciate that very much. And of course, the people in Ukraine will appreciate that as well. But with that, thank you all for another great one, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. We'll see you all on Tuesday night and maybe midday tomorrow if there's enough news to cover. But with that, get some rest and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Spring on me,